Okay. I call to order the Planning Commission meeting of Wednesday, May 6th. And Commissioner Barnes, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
That's right.
Sorry, I almost had Don do it again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Next, Mr. Petches, if you call the roll, please.
Commissioner Eggleston. Here. Commissioner Barnes. Here. Commissioner Brown.
Here.
Commissioner or Chair Darden.
Here.
Commissioner Crandall.
Here.
Commissioner Rulin. Here. And Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Okay, so that brings us to minutes, and we have two sets of minutes to approve, one from the study session and one from the Planning Commission meeting, both of April 22nd. Are there any changes to the study session minutes or a motion for approval? All in favor? Aye. Okay, passes 7-0. And then we have the minutes of the regular meeting. I have one small change on page, let's see, page 17. It's the second, it should be the second bullet point down. If we can just add, expressed concern about the unintended consequences of such a comprehensive ban. And then it's been brought to our attention that the vote should read 5-2-0 as opposed to 5-0-2. And then do you have a change as well?
I do have a change
Okay.
for page 15, under zoning amendments. Another bullet at the bottom, to review all allowed use tables in both zoning chapters for accuracy. In other words, I started comparing gun shops versus CC versus every mixed-use zone we can have a gun shop versus two over above there about the mixed-use 5 area. But, well, we should review everything for consistency in the other areas for manufactured homes versus whatever else. So I think I looked at the video and I stated that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that?
Yes, review all allowed use tables in both zoning chapters for accuracy in all areas.
Do you want our notes, Eileen, or you got both the comments? Okay. All right. Any other changes? Perhaps a motion?
I move. Oh, for consistency. Then with the changes, I move approval.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes 7-0. All right, that moves us, that moves us to the oral and written communication portion of the evening. Members of the audience may address the commission on matters of public interest which pertain to the city and are not otherwise on the agenda. If you wish to speak, please step forward to the microphone, state your name and city of residence, and make your presentations. Please limit your presentations to 3 minutes. Do you have any cards, Eileen?
No,
okay. Seeing no one stepping forward and having no cards, we'll move on to the public hearing process. The public hearing process.
I'm sorry. Pardon me. I do have something on.
All right, thank you. Okay. Pete Van Nuys.
Good evening. I'll be brief. The Riviera District is experiencing some dust up at the moment, and this has exposed some problems that we've had internally. For the first time, we've been challenged on a height limitation issue, and we are in the process now of trying to get our house in order. But one of the possible solutions which came up was the potential of having the zoning for the Riviera District created specific to the district in a way similar that it has been for Shore Cliffs. Without the Strom and Drang that went on with Shore Cliffs, our residents are extremely supportive of the status quo, that is maintaining a 16-foot height limit. strictly throughout the district, with the exception of 11 homes which are enumerated in the original CCNRs by lot number, which may go to 25. That's the condition we'd like to see maintained. If we had this zoning protection, it would take the pressure off our Committee on Architecture, which has recently shown itself unable to resist even the whiff of potential legal action. So I'm just putting that out there. If that's a potential, we'd be welcome to it, and you'd find us very cooperative. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Van Nuys. Is there anyone else who'd like to step forward at this time? Okay, seeing no one, we'll move on to the public hearing process. The public hearing process includes a staff presentation, a presentation by the applicant not to exceed 10 minutes, and public testimony. To facilitate the meeting for all attendees, the public is asked to limit their individual presentation to 3 minutes. Following closure of the public hearing, the Planning Commission will respond to questions raised during the hearing, discuss the issues, and act upon the matter by motion. The first item on our agenda is item 8A, Coastal Land Use Plan for the city's local coastal program, John Champa. And I'm guessing that you're going to be speaking for Mr. Champa.
Yeah, I think I can read this line. Staff recommends the Planning Commission continue the item to May 12th, special Planning Commission meeting.
Special?
Adjourned regular session. We just learned the difference during.
Was this a regular meeting? I thought it was an adjourned regular.
Yes.
Is there a motion?
I'll move.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Passes 7-0. He moved and, yeah. Okay, the second item on our agenda is item 8B, zoning amendment 14-456 and general plan amendment 15-049. And I believe you'll be addressing that one as well, Mr. Pitches.
It's true. Staff is requesting that the Planning Commission table this item to a date uncertain to allow staff additional time to complete the amendments in the environmental process.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll go ahead and make a motion then. I move we table this matter to a date uncertain.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I'm sorry, opposed? Okay, passes 7-0. All right, we're moving very quickly through our agenda this evening. That brings us to item 8C, Capital Improvement Program, General Plan Consistency Finding, and Adam Atamian will be bringing this issue to us.
Thank you, Chair Darden. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. My name is Adam Atamian, Associate Planner. Tonight, presenting the General Plan Consistency Finding for the fiscal year 2015-2016 Capital Improvement Program. This project was reviewed by the Planning Commission during a study session in the first meeting of April, and we were able to go through most of the projects here. There were some questions at that time. The questions that we had answers to have been included in the table, but at this point in time, we're making asking that you make a finding that the capital improvement program is consistent with the Centennial General Plan.
And for the record, I was not at the study session. However, I did review the minutes and feel comfortable with acting on this issue tonight.
Okay. And staff is available if there's any additional questions at this time.
Okay, are there questions for staff? Commissioner Brown?
I just looked at a comment or observation, went back through it again. I just looked at the total package, which is fairly well balanced, but kind of made the observation, I think the Beaches Parks and Rec effort is very underrepresented. We're only trying to update one park per year and some of the maintenance thing, and so I'd request that as staff works their way through the process next year, there's only 3 items for Beaches Parks and Rec in the entire effort, that we kind of look at that before we, I know we need pump stations to run optimally, but maybe there's some facilities in some of our parks that are in pretty sad shape. Just for comment for the record. Thank you.
That's noted.
Okay, Commissioner Barnes?
And I did not see anything, and have not seen in some time, anything for the Ridge Route Trail in Rancho San Clemente, so we'd be northeast of the freeway of the I-5, and I would certainly like to see some money budgeted in there because the paved road is about 30 years old, and the utilities, the city utilities, have been visiting the reservoirs. We have a number of reservoirs up there for the recycling program. We have the telephone poles. We have many utilities, and it's also a recreational route that is marked on the recreational magazines that come out. And we just got another one notating it for everyone, and it's on the city website, but it's in really a sad shape and it needs signs. So I'd sure like to see that added into the budget for next year.
Well, staff can get you information on the divisions that are responsible for those types of projects, and you can inform us of projects you'd like to see. As far as this process goes, we're simply reviewing it for general plan consistency, so I don't really have a whole lot of power to change what we
just thought I'd put in a
what we
plug
do.
for that area.
Wayne, is your light on?
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know, I still, it's on page 5 here, I still have an issue with regard to Avenida Palizada. And it says here, and I'm certainly always for sidewalks, but it says the project will install a continuous 4-foot wide sidewalk along West Avenida Palizada from El Camino to North Ola Vista. Due to the existing topography, installing the sidewalk will require West Avenida Palizada to be narrowed by 4 feet. This is one of the most heavily traveled streets from the freeway, and I don't know, it doesn't say in here how wide West Avenida Palizada will be as a result of that, after the 4-foot wide narrowing.
You know, I don't have that information with me. I'm not sure if Ken Knatz, the principal engineer, would be able to answer that further, but you know, these projects are vetted, you know, to maintain the level of service, and I'm sure that has been, you know, considered as a consequence of installing sidewalks.
Well,
Ken, would you want to? Are you able to speak on that?
Good evening, Commission. Ken Nass, Principal Civil Engineer. You know, I don't know a lot of the detail about that project. I'm sorry. Keep in mind, this is for conformance to the general plan, you know, to accommodate those policies in the general plan. I understand your concern, and I'm happy to bring it up to the transportation engineering folks. You know, I don't know the level of detail. Obviously, the sidewalks, the roadways will be constructed in conformance with the applicable, you know, relevant city as well as state standards, you know, that dictate and govern, you know, the requirements. You know, sidewalks are complicated because of ADA requirements with respect to, you know, how they transition, you know, along various grades and the topography of the city. But with respect to really diving into the detail to your question, I really can't answer it directly. But I'd be happy to try to follow up with you with the transportation engineer.
Could someone follow up?
Yeah,
with
no
me?
problem.
All right,
no problem.
thank you.
I'll let transportation engineer Tom Frank know about it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions of staff, or shall we open the public hearing and then we can move to discussion after? Okay. All right, let's open the public hearing. Eileen, do we have any cards on this issue? Okay. Okay, and seeing no one stepping forward, I'll close the public hearing and invite discussion or motion.
If there's no discussion, I'll make a move on it, because it is all consistent based on the thing. I move we approve resolution number PC 15-017, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of San Clemente, California, finding the fiscal year 2015-2016 capital improvement program consistent with the San Clemente General Plan.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, passes 7-0. That brings us to item 8D, which is zoning amendment 14 14-364, Site Plan Permit 14-365, Conditional Use Permit 14-366, Cultural Heritage Permit 14-367, Santiago Mixed Use. And I will be recusing on this item, but just for clarification, some of you may have noticed that in the minutes that I did review the Santiago Mixed Use project when it went through design review. But the difference tonight is that I have property that is within 500 feet of the area affected by the zoning amendment, which will be reviewed tonight and was not reviewed in design review. My property is far away from the Santiago mixed use, far outside my 500-foot circle. So just for clarification, that's why I'm recusing. And Commissioner Brown?
And I also have to recuse tonight on this item because I do own property within the 500-foot Brown Act circle radius for conflict of interest. And my circle actually intersects the property, so I need to recuse for the evening. Thank you.
Okay, and I will begin by disclosing that I did have conversations with the applicant at his request when he asked me to look at the, asked me for his feedback on the plans. I made the same disclosure at Design Review Subcommittee. Any other disclosures before we go?
Yeah.
I would like to disclose that I had a conversation with a GPAC member with regard to story poles and with regard to the ocean view. For the record, I will listen to all comments from the staff and from the public before making a decision.
I also disclosed that I talked to the applicant at the site a couple of days ago and walked the site and the poles.
Okay, so I guess we're ready to get started. Adam, you want to kick off the presentation, please?
All right, good evening again, Planning Commission. Adam Atamian, Associate Planner. Tonight I'm presenting the Santiago Mixed Use Project. This is a zoning amendment, site plan permit, conditional use permit, and cultural heritage permit request. The request before you is to forward a recommendation to the City Council for approval of a zoning amendment and the construction of a new mixed-use building. The project site is located at 1010 South El Camino Real. This is currently within the land use designation in the general plan designated as mixed use 3.2. The zoning ordinance locates this property within the neighborhood commercial zone. The property is outlined in red. The two yellow boxes are the historic properties that are within 300 feet of this site. The property is located on the corner of Avenida Santiago and South El Camino Real. The applications required for this request are a zoning amendment, which is to make the zoning consistent with the general plan, and this would be to designate the zone as mixed-use 3.2. A site plan permit to allow a new mixed-use building, a conditional use permit to allow residential units in a mixed-use zone, and a cultural heritage permit to allow a new building within 300 feet of historic properties and within an architectural overlay. A little background on this project. This has followed the Centennial General Plan adoption, which took place in 2014. This was a process that reevaluated the city's land use areas, and for this particular section of town, designated it as a South El Camino Real focus area, and the intent of that focus areas overlay, or not overlay, but designation was to incentivize revitalization. And there were a number of things that the general plan did that was intended to incentivize that revitalization. I'll go into those details in a bit. The property in question is a 130-foot wide by 100-foot deep, nearly 13,000 square foot lot. It was previously the site of a gas station which closed in the 1980s. Currently, the only modifications to the site that remain from that use are a retaining wall at the back of the property and the paving that's there. The State Water Resources Control Board has declared that this site has completed its cleanup status, so it's the underground tanks have been remediated adequately. The surrounding land uses include generally commercial and residential, with the commercial being along El Camino Real, and the residential to the west. Most of the residential is single-family residence. It's a residential low-density zone. However, the immediately abutting property is a legal non-conforming multifamily structure. And as noted before, there are 2 historic properties. The proposal for the zoning amendment is 2 parts. The first is to change the zoning map to designate the areas shown in the general plan as mixed use 3.2 as such on the zoning map. The map on the top is in the attachment to the draft resolution that was provided with the staff report, and the picture on the bottom shows what the general plan has, and then the project site's located in both of them. The other part of this application is to propose development standards for this new mixed-use zone. This process of the Centennial General Plan adoption has created a need for the city staff to go through and update many documents, such as the zoning ordinance, even the design guidelines, specific plans, things like that. The applicant has maintained contact with staff, has followed the city council meetings and planning commission meetings previously, and what they're proposing at this point is consistent with the direction that staff has in terms of the applicable zoning for this new zone. The most important ones, I would say, are the height limits and the FAR. The FAR is consistent with the general plan being 1.5. The height in this case is being proposed as a general height limit of 42 feet to the top of the roof, 37 feet to the plate line, but at no point can that encroach beyond a maximum height from the midpoint of the lot on El Camino Real of 35 feet to the top of the roof and 30 feet to the plate line. This is what the applicant is proposing. This is what current city council direction and planning commission review has informed staff that that's the direction we're going in. So with that zoning amendment, the applicant is proposing a new mixed-use development. This development consists of 4,416 square feet of commercial space, 7 two-bedroom residential units, and 2 levels of parking with a total of 30 parking spaces on site. The parking for the residential is located in a subterranean basement garage, which takes access off of the alley that runs behind this property. And then the commercial parking is located in a garage that it has access off of Santiago, and that parking is located behind the commercial uses, about at the level of El Camino Real. In terms of the staff's analysis of this project, the proposed zoning is consistent with the general plan. It's consistent with the direction from City Council and initial Planning Commission review. Staff is comfortable with what the applicant is proposing. However, this is still a process that Planning Commission is continuing to review. As part of this application, Staff informed the applicant that they had the option of waiting for staff to complete this work. However, staff has a lot of amendments to make, and the applicant really doesn't need all of them to be approved for his project to move forward. So he's elected to move forward with the application for the amendment. In terms of site design, the commercial portion of the project is located towards El Camino Real, fronting along the street. The residential portion is located towards the back of the building and on the upper floors. What this does is it separates the uses to be more compatible with the adjacent uses, of which the residential developments are located behind the building to the west, and the commercial is located along El Camino Real. So by locating these uses, the applicant's able to create somewhat of a buffer between the new commercial uses and the existing adjacent residential uses.
Jim, I have a question, if I could. Okay. This is the first floor, is it not?
That is the first floor.
And there's a residential unit on the first floor?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. So one residential unit on the first floor.
I believe part of one of the units is on the first floor.
All right, thank you.
The parking, as noted before, is located towards the rear of the building on 2 separate levels. And this allows a segregation between the commercial parking and the residential parking. And it also allows for no curb cuts to be on El Camino Real. There are currently curb cuts on the site. Those will be removed as part of this if this project moves forward. And that, that's anticipated to provide less traffic obstruction on El Camino Real, get people, more onto the side streets. The building setbacks, there are building setbacks provided along all property lines. There are certain places where the building does go up to or very near to the property line. But consistent with other mixed-use zones, the proposed development standards are really no setbacks, are provided for. However, this project, in an effort to provide more landscaping and more of a sense of openness along, especially the public streets, they're incorporating some setbacks to accommodate those features. The project meets minimum landscaping requirements for the existing zoning ordinance, which for this new zone we wouldn't anticipate much of a change in terms of those requirements. And the building also incorporates a stepped rear facade. There's a part of the top of the subterranean parking structure is above the grade of the alley, and then there's 3 stories on top of that. The top 2 stories are stepped back 10 feet and 20 feet respectively. So there is, some step back additionally, as the building goes up in elevation. The design review subcommittee was generally supportive of this application. It wasn't unanimous, but for the most part, the application was deemed to be consistent with the intent of the general plan. The change of zoning, and especially the urban design element. There were still some massing concerns, but overall the DRC was supportive. Compatibility is a unique feature on this application. This is the first development proposed under the new mixed-use 3.2 zoning. So, one of the ways that we can review applications, especially new developments, is whether they, is how well they are compatible with surrounding development. This doesn't necessarily mean consistent in terms of the same kinds of buildings. What we're looking for in terms of compatibility is does the use of this building and does this structure work with different types of development around it. Part of the unique nature of this new zone is that it makes a transition between a residential low-density zone and an existing neighborhood commercial zone. It's only one lot wide, so there's not really a gradual transition period over the course of a few lots that, like we would have in most other zones. Instead, it goes from low-density residential to a new mixed-use zone that has a substantial increase in FAR, and then back down to a less dense commercial zone. And based on all of the work that was put into the general plan, the intention here was that obviously we're not going to have consistency in terms of the scale of buildings, but more a pattern of compatibility where this side of the street turns into somewhat of a buffer between residential and commercial. And it's dependent on each development to work those features in, into their proposals. In this case, with the residential in the back, commercial in the front, the step backs on the rear side of the building, staff is comfortable with supporting this project as being compatible with uses, even though it may be of a different scale in terms of development. The surrounding uses are typically 1 and 2 and some 3-story buildings in the area. Again, the old zoning was changed to incentivize revitalization. Under the old zoning, very little had happened over the course of the last 2 decades, and some concessions were given in terms of development standards to incentivize new development in this area. And so based on that intent of the general plan and the basic layout of the zone and how it's only 1 lot wide, staff has analyzed this in terms of the context of what that leaves us with. So this is consistent with the general plan's vision for the South El Camino Real focus area. One aspect of this project that staff does have some concerns with, just in terms of our ability to review it, is the impacts to ocean views. It wasn't entirely apparent until the story poles were completed that this project would have would obstruct a portion of an ocean view from the I-5 freeway. One of the general plan policies states that the new development shall be designed to minimize obstructions to ocean views from the I-5 freeway. Right. When staff really started to look at this, and this being the first project where we've had to apply that, we realized there's really no good guidelines in place in terms of how we are to analyze this. The closest thing that we have is a view impact analysis. The view impact analysis is a tool that looks at the totality of a view from typically a public view corridor and looks at landscaping and buildings and skylines and a lot of factors to determine what type of impact a new development will have on an existing public view corridor. This is specifically talking about ocean views, not the totality of the scene. Furthermore, there's no good guidelines in place in terms of adequately identifying when development has minimized obstructions to those views enough. As far as staff is concerned at this point, we're looking at this as the intent of the general plan was to maintain the connection between the city and the beach. So the people driving down the freeway know that they're in a beach community because they see both the city and the beach and the ocean. We would recommend a view impact analysis. However, what we're asking for tonight is a little bit more clarification in terms of what the Planning Commission would actually like to see in order to make a determination whether this project is consistent with this general plan policy.
And Bonnie, did you have a question?
I sure do. I have a suggestion. As you know, that by sending in some review very simple review work. Another tool that might be very helpful for us to review. As it says in your staff report, that the story poles, there are some problems with using them set alone. I believe it says here the impacts of the encroachment are not fully understood or described by the story poles. And therefore, what I found effective in the past for other projects is simply taking your pointer on your computer and connecting the story pole tops to that, and then transparently filling the area in. You can see through it partially. You can see what's there. And it gives you an idea of the mass of the space that is actually being taken up within the boundaries of the circumscribed area. And then also on the Luna's plans, which we didn't show tonight, but would be on sheet A3, I believe it's the eastern section, and it says on El Camino Real, that aspect, that can be resized and simply placed on the story poles itself within and on that to show actually what that would look like if the staff would be interested in, or commissioners would be interested in seeing it that way. It's a very simple thing to do. And so I would certainly, for a view analysis, especially since this is the very first one being tested, we have to really check it carefully. It is a little bit harder to note what a building would look like when you can actually see through the space when the story poles are there. And some are very concerned about not seeing the trees along the beach anymore. There's looks to be about 80 there that will no longer be seen from this visual corridor. So it's just something to consider in looking. I believe the picture of that eastern corridor was on your slide. You showed that it said proposed. Back a few slides, that one. If you want to move the slides back, but you don't have to.
On the
Okay.
proposed.
Bonnie, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, would you do that? Would you connect the lines and
you
fill
know,
in the area?
Staff, well, Jim, if you want to, I
Back
can.
one more.
Well, I'd like
You
to
can
chime in on
entertain.
that. I think that actually we maybe deserve something a little more sophisticated than that.
Yes.
And what we would be asking for the applicant to complete would be a visual simulation from this vantage point, clearly because it's a general
Perfect.
plan policy. And then if there was anything else that the Planning Commission thinks is important for your determination to make the findings on the project, we'd like to hear from you. But my thought was the view impact analysis requires a visual simulation in order to do the view impact analysis. So that would be the key component. And that would be performed by someone that does it, professionally, that makes sure and verifies that it accurately reflects the story poles and is in scale with the photo.
Wayne, did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. It was hard for me to see on the staff report here where the lines were actually, but the question I have is, are the story poles heights to the left and the right of the elevator tower, are those at the very top of the roof line? Or are those at the top of the facade itself? Perhaps that's more of a better question for the applicant. But I think it's important that we have story poles that are at the very top of the roof line to adequately take a look at that. And my second question is, who does the analysis? Does the city do the analysis, or does the applicant do the analysis?
For the view impact analysis, we're asking the applicant to provide that.
And how does the city verify that?
Let me clarify. For the visual simulation, it would be done by, just like a noise study. The city wouldn't do the noise study. A professional would do the view simulation. We would do the analysis of the impact on the corridor. That wouldn't be the applicant's job, it would be staff's job. But typically, we would ask a professional to prepare that, and so long as it was a qualified professional to do the view simulation, we don't require, or do we go out and typically hire that person to do the job.
And they would certify the accuracy of the story poles and the top of the roof line. Is that correct?
Well, the accuracy of the story poles were certified by the person that installed them. Then what the visual simulation would do would be, using those story poles, they would be able to accurately, determine that their visual simulation is consistent with the story pole height. So it's good that they're there. It gives you an added verification of the accuracy of the photo simulation.
All right, thank you.
Let me turn that off.
Okay. All right, please continue.
Okay, so the project's architecture, again reviewed by the Design Review Subcommittee. In terms of the style of the architecture and the consistency with the city's design guidelines, the Design Review Subcommittee was supportive of that in terms of the breaking up of the building into smaller, more human-scaled parts, the architectural treatment, the details that were used. The project will be required as a Spanish colonial revival to include mud-packed clay tile roof, smooth white stucco with the slight undulations, black wrought iron details, recessed windows and doors, and the landscaping, which has been reviewed by the city's landscape architect as well. The parking on this project is shown on the plans utilizing the reduced downtown mixed-use parking requirements. That's what the applicant would like to propose. Staff is not supportive of this area having a reduced parking requirement, partially due to the fact that this is not a mixed-use zone in the sense of the typical downtown visitor-serving cores that we have. Instead, this is really more of a transitional buffer between two zones, and it's not really anticipated that we're going to have the same kind of park once for multiple visits that we would see in the downtown. However, the amount of parking that is saved with the reduced parking ratio happens to be the amount of parking that's required for guest parking, and the code allows for a shared parking agreement to share guest parking and commercial parking on a site. Typically, it would reduce the hours of operation for the commercial uses to not be in conflict with the times that guest parking is most likely to be used. And staff is much more comfortable requiring this to be done rather than applying the downtown mixed-use parking reduction standards to this area. One thing to note, though, this project does provide, with the shared parking agreement, it would provide all the parking required by the code on site, which is really a unique occurrence in this area of town. I know that parking is an issue. However, the parking issues are solved over time when new development comes in that is consistent and complies with the parking requirements of the zone, such that over time we have projects that actually provide all of their parking rather than many non-conforming situations. So the main findings for approval for this project, and this is going through all of the applications, the main ones being that the proposed amendment is consistent with the general plan. The proposed development is allowed in the zone. The site is suitable for the proposed development. It complies with the proposed development standards, including parking with the shared parking agreement. The proposal is consistent with the intent of the zone and is compatible with the mix of uses in the surrounding area. The proposed use will not negatively impact the surrounding land uses, and the architectural treatment complies with the general plan and design guidelines, and there will not be a negative impact on historic properties. Findings that staff still needs to make is that the proposed development complies with the goals and objectives of the San Clemente general plan, and this is specifically discussing the general plan policy regarding impacts to, or obstructions to ocean views. So we would like some direction on that tonight, and because of that, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission continue this application to a later date to provide the applicant an opportunity to develop information that would provide staff the ability to review a view impact analysis. That concludes staff's presentation. The applicant would also like to make a presentation tonight, and Jim, he does have a PowerPoint in the folder.
Okay.
And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, and we still have a couple of questions for you.
Got a quick question for you.
Yes.
The consultant that's doing the update to the zoning code has presented to us the way of analyzing height on sloping sites.
Yes.
What's the sequence? Is that going to be enforced by the time this is reviewed, or? In other words, can we use that and hold those rules that if it complies with that, can we base a finding on that?
Yes. The
Even
way
though
that
it's not
the way
in the
the
code
draft
now?
resolution is written, there are some aspects of what the applicant proposed, specifically at the last Planning Commission meeting, that's not included in the resolution. However, they do have all of that language, and that could be applied to this project if you'd like to do that. There's
And I would
specifically-
request that, if that is the case, that you request from the applicant that they provide a visual document showing that it complies with that approach to verifying height.
Okay.
Wayne, do you have a question?
The question I had, Adam, was the zoning amendment 14-364 is embedded in the on the Santiago mixed-use project permit, cultural heritage permit. Is that not unusual for the zoning? Shouldn't there be a zoning amendment separate from this project?
I've seen it done both ways. Based on the scale of this project, it seemed appropriate to package it as one. It could be broken out if that's what the Planning Commission would like to see.
Could you clarify that just a little bit? I don't understand exactly what you mean.
Well, usually a zoning amendment like this is a separate from the development cultural heritage permit, conditional use permit and cultural heritage permit. So they're two separate issues. And here they're together under, embedded into each other.
It's all one resolution, but they're all individual items that you need to make findings for. And if the Planning Commission desires it, it wouldn't be any problem at all for us to come back after the items continue tonight with separate resolutions, so it makes you feel more comfortable.
I would
Oftentimes
feel
if you-
that way, yeah.
Oftentimes, if you want to, sometimes you have the choice of maybe passing some aspects of the project where that's where it makes a lot of sense. In this case, it's all going to be going forward to the city council. So it's-
I just think it's cleaner
sure,
to do
we
it.
can do that. We'll do that.
And just to clarify, this was done, Jim, because we're kind of an unusual situation. And correct me if I'm wrong, we're in an unusual situation where we've recently passed a general plan, our zoning ordinance are in conformance with it, so the applicant was in kind of in a tough spot because they either could conform with the general plan or the zoning ordinance, but not both. Is my recollection correct?
Well, yeah, if he wants to move forward ahead of us finally adopting, the general plan and the zoning ordinance update, then it's necessary for him to process the zoning ordinance amendment.
Okay, thank you. And Bonnie, you have a question?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask how you may, or how you plan to address the goal of the South El Camino, Real, west of Interstate 5 goal, which is on LU 35. How does this create a transitional area featuring spectacular ocean views? How does this feature the spectacular ocean view with this project?
The way that's written, it could be seen that the ocean views would be for the development. Now, granted, if you're on El Camino Real, a one-story building here is going to block some ocean views. You know, we're talking about the I-5 freeway, you know, view, and that's one issue. In terms of the spectacular ocean views that the general plan focus area policies are talking about, yeah, I think that they're actually talking more about the amenities that would be available to new development in this area. Not specifically that that somebody driving down El Camino Real is supposed to maintain an ocean view everywhere, because everything on the west side of El Camino Real is essentially going to block.
So that would be your
ocean view.
interpretation of the goal? Okay. I don't know that that would.
Adam,
you know, I don't.
when I read that, I thought that was views from the development itself.
That's what I'm taking it to be. That's what I'm taking it to be, because if the goal is to maintain ocean views in this corridor, and the goal is also to incentivize, revitalization through new development, that would be an internal conflict, since every single building on the west side of El Camino Real, whether it's one story or half a story, is going to block the ocean view.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
I
then
can only take it that it means spectacular ocean views for the people in the buildings.
Then could I ask how you might give us some suggestions for LU 1305, which about the views, which says the new development shall be designed to minimize the obstructions of ocean views from the I-5 freeway.
Well, that was the discussion we had
Right.
earlier.
It
You know,
is.
we don't, staff is a
It
little
is.
bit unclear on what meets the threshold for an adequate amount of minimization. You know, we're not talking about completely removing any obstructions to the ocean views,
Right.
but it's unclear whether we're talking about, are we trying to maintain the intent of that connection with the beach, or, you know.
May I ask you one more thing about the Luna plans, which we don't have here today, but it was on what would be the third floor of the commercial. It doesn't show anything on there. It's a blank. But on the second floor, it says commercial, I believe. Is there something that it's not open?
The third floor of the commercial, I believe, is a roof well. There is no third floor. What you're
It's
probably
just all
seeing is,
open?
I think the setback.
No, it has a boundary on it, just the same as the floor below. Maybe I have the page number goofed. It's not on your presentation here.
and I don't think that.
He has it there.
Well,
And
you've
what-
got, the first floor is retail, the second floor is commercial, the third floor is essentially the roof structure.
Is that correct? Yeah, the one,
Planning Commission, do you mind if I pass this up to Adam so that he can at least respond to the
Sure.
question?
Sure, that's fine.
But I'm assuming that that's the space you're talking about, and that's really just a section through the building, so that's the,
Yeah,
It'll be
that's,
open.
it's just
Open.
volume within the retail space. The office space and the retail space are taller than the residential units. Residential are 9 feet clear, whereas the office is 11 feet clear, so if you cut through the residential on the third floor, it clips the top of the office. That's the same, it's the second floor of the office.
thank you.
Any more questions for staff? All right, then the applicant is invited to come up and make a presentation.
Slides. I'd like to hand those to you, potentially pass around this, just address the views a little. I have some slides coming up that I can put on. This one or this one? This one? Okay. Perfect. I'll maximize it. That, Okay. Good evening, Planning Commission. San Clemente is a beautiful city. I live here and I work here. I've made it my home. We all love the laid-back beach vibe of the city and the city's small-town charm. None of us want to change that. Some of the areas of town have suffered from a little neglect. Since I've owned the property on South El Camino Real, I've received several letters from the city manager. It's an old gas station site, and they've asked me what plans I have to develop the old abandoned gas station site that's been sitting vacant since 1986. And they've asked me in what way the city can help me with my plans. Well, as a resident, I've taken an interest in the city, and I've tracked the recent general plan update. The City Council and Planning Commission's decision to approve mixed use in this particular area should be applauded. Not only does it create an incentive to encourage development of older lots and dilapidated buildings, it creates an opportunity to provide urban infill housing close to the beach, shops, transportation corridors, and downtown. Mixed-use housing is a more sustainable alternative to providing housing than tract home development. Here on a 13,000 square foot old gas station site, we're able to provide 7 homes, people in our community that are well amenitized because of their location. We're within walking distance to the beach, Ralph's, coffee shops, restaurants, etc. The project also has low water landscaping. There's not a single blade of grass in the project, and for those of you that live in California are aware that we have significant water shortages. These urban infill projects use significantly less water and energy than a single family home on a 6,000 square foot lot with a lawn and a pool. I buy coffee most days at Zebra's Coffee. When I saw the for sale sign on the fence on the site, I decided to take the city up on their call to action. The stretch of El Camino Real that I take to work every day suffers from a little neglect. The area is characterized, with the exception of Ralph's and the new medical building, by older buildings and vacant gas station sites. It's an eclectic scene that meets a visitor that drives up from South El Camino Real, south of town, or from San Diego. Back in 2013, when the Planning Commission, this Planning Commission, I think it was in November of 2013, approved the general plan, and then the City Council in early 2014, I met with city staff just to find out what it was exactly that we were incentivizing in this area and what would be allowed. And so when the City Council and Planning Commission ultimately approved that general plan, I submitted new plans for a project that followed the intent of what had been approved. The initial design was in response to the approved language back in at that time, which allowed 3 stories and 45 feet, which is the current general plan language down on El Camino Real, South El Camino Real. We subsequently went back and forth after meetings with planning commissioners, city council members, and staff, and redesigned the project, reducing it to comply with the more recent direction that we've been given from everyone to reduce the height on El Camino Real, facing El Camino Real, to 2 stories and 35 feet. Which ultimately complies with, again, the most recent direction that we've all had. Even though we have less to work with than what we started out with, I'm very excited. I'm very excited about this particular site. It has fantastic topography. It looks like that today, but it has awesome views. We all live in San Clemente because we love the beach. We all have surfboards, fishing rods, bikes, golf clubs, and what have you. So we decided to go down the expensive route and excavate dirt from under the site. So we're going 12 feet under El Camino Real to put 2 car garages for each and every one of the 7 units, as well as guest parking. We also put the commercial, as Adam mentioned a little earlier, and the office on El Camino Real to buffer the residential components of the project from the noise and air pollution from Pacific Coast Highway, which is pretty noisy, and the 5 freeway. We put convenient retail parking immediately behind that, up on the level that's about 5 feet below El Camino Real, behind the retail. We also took note of the existing conditions up and down the alley with some of these taller buildings where the existing commercial buildings have effectively turned their back on the residential community immediately behind the project, and they've abandoned the alley. We've made a concerted effort in our project to beautify the alley and put, that's a picture of the building, so that's what it looks like today, and that's what it's going to look like. And then we've made a concerted effort to improve the alley from its current condition there, which I would argue is somewhat forgotten, to a landscape condition, which in my opinion is somewhat better. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to our project architect, Michael Luna. I picked him because he's local. He is very smart, and he was able to figure out how to get 7 residential units onto a relatively compact site. These sites are complicated. There's a lot of circulation to be able to deal with getting the cars off El Camino Real. We used the alley, which is obviously it's the back of house function for El Camino Real, and so we put parking in underground. And he also does a really good job with Spanish colonial architecture. So I'd like to introduce you to Michael, let him talk you through our architectural efforts, as well as our efforts to beautify the alley. And then I'd like to step up and conclude after that. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Nick. Michael Luna, architect for the project. We set out to comply with all the goals to achieve a revitalization that was called for by the whole general plan effort. And that's what this project is before you. We've simply sought to try to do what the general plan has called for. To clarify a couple of things with regard to the accuracy of the story poles that are out there now. The story poles that are out there now are strictly based upon our height analysis that are part of our drawings, and the story poles are required to be placed to the exact height of the building that's proposed, and the accuracy of the poles are required by the city to be certified by a separate entity, a registered civil engineer. So that stamp of a registered civil engineer has certified that the poles that are out there accurately represents the height of our building. With regard to the processing of our project to include the zone change, obviously this is not the first time in the state of California that a city has gone through a general plan update. And when this happens and your zoning ordinance goes out of date, it is very par for the course and very standard to apply for a zone change to simply place the zoning in accordance to match the general plan. And that is done typically throughout the state of California in cities when the new general plan has been adopted. Our design. We've developed a courtyard project and a patio concept that attempts to try to break the building into separate components. And the courtyard creates the separation of that so that the development actually looks like it potentially has occurred over time by breaking it into different components and to break down, which helps to reduce the mass of the project. But what's really unique about our design that you're not going to find on any other proposals that have ever been done in our city is to create to dedicate the first 3.5 feet of our project to a landscape planter. And you can see a depiction of it here in perspective. And you see it also on the other previous slide. I don't know if I can still scroll over there back to that one. You see this landscaped element. So much work has been done by so many people to recharge these alleys, to make these alleys safer, usable, and attractive. And so we gave away the first 3.5 feet to accomplish this landscape element. So other than the actual entrance for the residential parking on the far left side of that slide. In addition to that, the design guidelines in our city, which we heavily rely upon, has asked that when you go up a story, that the next story needs to be set back at least 5 feet, and then the next story above that needs to go back another 5 feet. Well, we said, you know what, that's not enough. We went up the first story and then set back 10 feet. And then we went from the second story to the third story, went another 10 feet, thereby creating on the second level a 10-foot setback from the alley and a 20-foot setback. 20% the depth of the lot is how much that setback is occurring on that third floor as viewed from the back of the project. Very significant step above and beyond what would normally be required. The parking is self-explanatory, I think, with regard, we tried to get the commercial parking very accessible off of Santiago, and then we made the residential parking off of the alley. With regard to parking, in the North Beach area of San Clemente, and in the Pier Bowl area of San Clemente, and in the downtown core area of the city of San Clemente, mixed-use zones, the same parking ratio is being used for all three of those areas. To say that this area should have a different mixed-use parking concept it doesn't make any sense to me. There's no Ralph's grocery store in North Beach, and there certainly isn't one in the Pier Bowl. And so this site in this area is very easily accessible to the downtown. It's easy to get to the downtown from here, to Ralph's, to coffee shop, to restaurants, on foot. It's just a few blocks away. And so to say that we need a different, because we're creating a different sort of mixed use here, the reality is whoever lives here is not going to go in their car when they want to go to shopping at Ralph's or they want to stroll and get a cup of coffee. To have the parking scenario for a mixed use designation makes much sense here because it's going to be less trips. And that's the whole idea of the mixed use concept. The tower on the project is the tallest element. The tower can be lowered some. It was identified as a potential architectural feature, which is something that the design guidelines ask us, encourage us to do. But as you can see, here's an image that was taken that the city has used for many, many years, one of the most fondest photos ever taken in San Clemente. It shows our beautiful red roofs against the beautiful blue ocean. Our project is not going to be any different than that. We are not cutting off any horizon line. If anything, these palm trees are blocking more view, and you can see the same thing in the diagrams that were just given to you. Our project barely skims the edge of the beach. Our roof just comes up to the edge of the beach, and the edge of the ocean where we can start to see it, other than the tower. And as I say, if we think we want to reduce that a little bit, we can, but that's against the goals and policies of the design guidelines. The freeway photos that we've taken clearly show that we are not blocking any sort of large mass of ocean view here. It's a very minimal amount, and it's no more than any of these projects have already done. We did not create the general plan, the community did. We are simply just trying to comply with it. This area needs something to happen. Unfortunately, we're the first ones to get something done. And hopefully we can reach the goals. And with that, I need to turn over the remainder of my time, please, to the owner.
I have a question. In your design process, you use the word, we tried this, we tried that. Did you try to come up with a scheme that met the parking requirement? In other words, did you try to come up with a scheme that had 3 more parking spaces in it?
The site is, yeah, we did. Every project we undertake, we try to create more parking spaces.
Were you able to achieve that?
No.
Well, I think
No.
I'd
Go ahead.
actually like to respond to that, because I think our understanding has always been that this was a mixed-use project, and I'd like to sort of touch on that in my conclusion. But my read on mixed use is that the mixed-use parking requirements should be applied to a mixed-use zone. In our opinion, the mixed use in a neighborhood where you've got neighborhood serving retail, if anything, is more appropriate than we have visitor serving retail, because downtown by its own definition as destination retail requires someone to drive from further out, let's say Talaga or
Yeah,
Southwest.
no, I understand that, but that's not the question I asked. I asked the question if Michael tried to do a scheme that provided the amount of parking that this was requiring, which was 33 versus what you have at 30. And I said, did you have a scheme? Were you able to develop a scheme that had 33 parking spaces?
Go ahead, Ted. Go ahead and say it. I couldn't really get any more parking on this site. We've dug down to eternity on this thing, and there's just no more spaces.
So I'd just like to conclude. I'd like to thank Adam for a very thorough staff report. Thank you very much, Adam. I wanted to touch on parking a little bit. Obviously, we've talked a little bit about that, and I'm going to respond to that question again, but I think our understanding was always that we were designing to a mixed-use parking requirement, so we always, as we track this has always been the parking ratio that we thought was appropriate for the site. The planning, I'd also, I'm wanting to encourage you to use the mixed-use parking in this particular zone, the 3.2 zone, for the same reasons that it's used down on El Camino Real, North El Camino Real, the T-zone and the Pier Bowl. To me, the whole point of the mixed-use parking is to encourage people to get out of their cars and walk. You're putting neighborhood-serving retail right where all the houses are. You're right across from Rolls, right next to Coffee. You're right next to MRK. You're close to the beach. And the whole concept of mixed use is to try and reduce trips, to try and get cars off the road. And I think that's what these projects are trying to do. I would offer again that there's a stronger argument for using the mixed-use parking ratio for the commercial space, because our residential complies, where we're putting local serving retail close to homes and shopping. I think I touched on that a little bit. The other thing I'd like to point out, which never came up this evening, is our current site has 3 curb cuts in it. It used to be a gas station. So there are 2 curb cuts on El Camino Real and 1 on Santiago. We're proposing to put all our residential parking in off the alley, so we'll be removing 2 curb cuts in the proposed development of El Camino Real. So there'll be a significant amount of street parking on El Camino Real that's going to be made available, probably 3 or 4 more. We're not asking that to be counted in the project, but that was just an observation. And then again on these views, I have to be honest, I didn't realize that the views were going to be relevant until I'd read the staff report. There was a comment that talks about new development shall be designed to minimize obstructions of ocean views from the 5 freeway. To my knowledge, the city of San Clemente does not have any view protection ordinances other than specific view corridors down Avenida Del Mar and Avenida Pico. I may be wrong, but that's just my understanding. I drove the freeway several times to see how much our project impacts the building, or how much our building will impact the ocean views. As you head south down the freeway from Ralph's and you have sort of a good view, the building comes into sight, but you've got great views off to the right. And then I think the view we're all talking about, which is this one up here, is once you pass the freeway off-ramp and you're looking at a perpendicular angle over your shoulder down towards the ocean. And again, I think that this particular building in its current form, it only just clips the ocean views. This particular photograph doesn't necessarily do it justice, because you've still got good ocean views in either direction of this photograph. So I think as a percentage of the ocean that's impacted, it's a relatively small impact. But this again was something that we've done fairly recently, because we didn't even know that this was going to be a concern. And again, I think one of the things that this project does is it's been designed at 35 feet, which is 10 feet below what the existing general plan allows for El Camino Real. So with us being 10 feet lower than the existing general plan, I'd argue that in its own right, and this design mitigates the impacts. Again, in conclusion, I'd like you to consider approving the application of this project. I'm personally not sure what spending a few $1,000s on a consultant to have them look at the views is going to tell us any different than our commissioner pointed out a little bit earlier about putting the lines together. So I'm hopeful that we would be able to make an assessment on that, because I think at the end of the day it's going to come down to a judgment call of images just like this one. Again, I'd like to urge you to support this project. I got involved in this project as a resident of our city that wanted to do something positive, and it's 100% an outcome as a result of the general plan that all you folks in the city council ultimately approved fairly recently. Thank you very much.
I have a question for you. You passed around 3 photographs for us to look at, and you've shown us 2 of those, but not the 3rd one with the roof filled in. Could you do that?
Sure. That one there.
Okay, so what Commissioner Barnes was asking for is pretty much that, right?
Yes.
And the dark blue versus the light blue is the division of sky and water? That's what we're seeing there? So we're seeing ocean over the top of the roof, clearly. Is that right? Okay. I think that that's something that we needed to see, so I'm glad that you could produce that for us. Thank you.
Thank you. And actually, Wayne, did you have a question?
I have an additional question for Adam.
Okay, sure. I do too. You go ahead. All right.
Adam, in the general plan and the discussions that the city council had, was there a ratio between the percentage of commercial versus residential in a project like this? This seems to be heavy on residential versus commercial.
This, no. The general plan does not talk about a minimum. Typically, that's done with a minimum and maximum commercial FAR as part of a mixed-use development. This is something that has been discussed. However, the city, or I should say the applicants, or not the applicants, the consultant working with the city council and planning commission so far has proposed zoning ordinance update that, that actually removes that from the zoning code. Which is what's consistent here. Now, what the applicant is proposing is development standards to be added to the existing zoning ordinance. And so you can see here, there is a minimum and maximum FAR. The minimum FAR on the mixed use 3 is 0.35 for the commercial portion of a project. This project is at 0.34 and change. So it's quite close, and I did have discussions about that with the applicant. However, in reviewing what the city was, the direction that we got from City Council and Planning Commission and the consultant, they had omitted the minimum maximum commercial portion FAR, so we did that to be consistent with that.
Who omitted that?
You know, it's not on the consultant's proposed zoning ordinance, and I can't tell you exactly what decision, where that came from. Mr. Petrus may have more information on that.
All I recall was the direction was to give credit for outdoor seating areas, because right now, the 0.35 didn't allow any credit for like a restaurant that wanted to do part of the restaurant outside. And so the new standard was supposed to evaluate and add that as an option, so we didn't discourage outdoor seating areas as part of restaurant types of uses. I wasn't aware of a reduction in the FAR ratio altogether, or elimination of it altogether.
It's totally gone.
Just to continue on that, the applicant is not opposed, was not opposed to that. You know, our discussions were basically, you know, would the minimum commercial FAR in this area be consistent with the mixed use in the downtown, or would, you know, would this be seen as a more commercial area, less commercial? It got into some discussions. The intent, though, was with this project was to make it as close to the 0.35 as possible, and
Right. No, I understand.
part of that was, yeah.
Michael, do you have a question?
Yeah, Adam, when you first started to talk about this, I thought you said that this complied with the parking code.
It
What
complies.
what did you mean by that?
Well, the code allows a shared parking agreement to be used to limit the hours of operation. Typically, the way it would work is that it would limit the hours of operation of commercial, and if they meet certain conditions of that shared parking agreement, they would in effect be meeting the requirements of the code.
Okay, so that's in the eyes of the city, that's a legitimate way to make up for that difference with a parking agreement?
Yes,
Is it well-known and done in other places in the city?
it is.
Okay, thanks.
And I've got a couple questions, Adam. With regards to the parking situation, I was curious what staff thought of the applicant's argument that downtown is a visitor-serving area, there's going to be cars coming into there, that they shouldn't be held to a higher standard because the residents were already there and would, you know, hopefully be walking around more. Does staff have a response to that argument?
I do. The whole idea of the mixed-use zone was really to take advantage of the more urban environment of the downtown core. And clearly in the downtown core, you have people parking for commercial, multiple commercial and within one stop. So you go to a restaurant, you might stop by and, you know, get some candy at the candy store, or, you know, a glass of wine at the wine bar or something like that, where you have multiple stops and multiple uses. So there was some variation in the standard that was suggested originally by our parking consultants to lower the standard because of that one-stop, multiple-use type of a situation. The South El Camino Real corridor has not as much of a dynamic in terms of the types of uses and the visitor-oriented types of components to it at this time. And frankly, it's always been considered as more of a car corridor than a pedestrian corridor. So we didn't think it was really appropriate to give that break Now, that's something that that's all kind of up in the air with the process of this zoning ordinance update. If the planning commission wanted to, put more of an emphasis on pedestrian orientation of the corridor, then maybe those kind of standards could be considered and adopted. But frankly, from the way we've seen it, we see it kind of transforming. It doesn't seem like the required density to make that work. The more urban an area is, the more you can lower the parking standards. A very urban area like downtown Pasadena, it works out to about 1.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet is the ratio that works in that kind of a situation. And the less urban you get it, then the standards kind of grow. Our downtown's probably more like about a 2.5. Here, I don't think it really has the density to meet that lower ratio. That's just my professional opinion, though. So, but if you had a goal, say, to change the character of the area or some kind of urbanize it, I think the problem with this corridor is it's just kind of one lot thick. So the dynamics aren't quite there. You don't have the multifamily residential in combination with the mixed use all around it. So that was our thinking anyway, and suggesting that we retain the more restrictive or the more higher parking generation rate for this particular area.
Okay, thank you. And Adam, is my recollection correct that we defined the I-5 freeway as a public view corridor?
No.
Is that true? So it doesn't have any official designation as any kind of view corridor in the city, is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to add something to this, and I'm sure that I see a few GPAC members in the audience. And one of the key things that kind of brought on that particular policy was the Rouse development in the tower that kind of just sits there right smack in your face as you drive by. And a lot of people kind of regret that particular decision in terms of the height of that. There's a certain aspect of driving down the I-5 that you get, and especially when you're driving south from Dana Point and inland cities and you hit the bend, and then you get into San Clemente and you get that fresh air and then you see the ocean blue. That, just kind of trying to describe what we were thinking about, or the GPAC was thinking about, was to preserve that, you're entering a beach town, you're entering San Clemente. We have ocean here, it's a beach town feel. You definitely get that as you drive through San Clemente. So it didn't identify it as a corridor specifically, where corridors we get really defined with cones and exactly where it is. But I know that, or at least my feeling of what I understood the GPAC to intend to do was preserve that feel, that character of San Clemente as you drive through the town, that people know they're in a beach town. So it wasn't so refined like thou shall not block any blue, but I think that as a guideline, if I could describe it, that would be the best I could, is preserving that character.
Okay. And last question, I think, at least for now. Is the applicant required to do any alley improvements such as undergrounding the overhead lines, anything like that? I don't recall seeing anything in the conditions about that.
I don't know off the top of my head. I believe that Zach Ponson is here with the engineering division. Could probably answer more questions like that.
Okay, do we know?
Zach Ponson with the engineering division. There are some regulations for undergrounding power lines. Typically, it comes with new track development. And in this case, a lot of times you'll see it also with, there's a new building code where you have to do it from the power pole to your building. So those service laterals that come into your property, bless you, do have to come in underground. In this case, we haven't included any condition to have the alley undergrounded, because then you're going several properties outside their alley and end up adding more poles to support that, the dead man's end. So it was not included as a condition in this project.
Okay, thank you. Wayne, questions?
Yes, thank you. That brings up the issue here. One would think that, since you asked the question, I'm going to further on it, but there's going to be residential in back. Would it not be more advantageous to eliminate those lines in that block area on the alleyway if there's going to be residents and back there, because they're going to be looking at the lines, I would think? I think that's something that we should take a look at. Okay, that's number one there. And Jim, I have a question for you. The shared parking, which means that in fact, if a commercial space is leased to a use that's not going to be opened at night, doesn't that limit the ability of the owner to lease to a variety of different uses, such as a restaurant that would be open at night? It seems to me that that's the shared parking, that it really limits that ability, does it not?
Well, in the sense that if it may eliminate the size of a restaurant to, I think that if we were evaluating that, and you were talking about 3 parking spaces out of all the commercial parking, we probably wouldn't allow them to count the 3 parking spaces toward the restaurant if it was, as you said, conflicting with the time period.
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be, it would be reserved for residential in the evening times and open for the commercial in the 8 to 5 period, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the restaurant would be limited to, not that one couldn't go in, but the number of seats would be limited to whatever the remaining commercial parking spaces are, whether it's 8 or whatever the number is.
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't preclude the uses necessarily, but it would limit maybe potentially the size.
All right, thank you.
Okay, are there any more questions of staff or the applicant? If not, then I will open the public hearing. I'm guessing that some people haven't been to the Planning Commission before. What I'll do is we only have, I currently have 3 cards. Are there any more cards that we have? If you plan to speak tonight, if you could fill out a card and hand it in to our secretary. Yeah, the cards are in the back. Okay. I'll call you up. I'm going to call the first 3 names, and if you could line up, this makes things run a little bit more efficiently. And as someone finishes, I'll call the person who's on deck up next. Okay. So I will open the public hearing. Thank you. And the first 3 people are Jennifer Massey, Pete Van Nuys, and Bob Conrad.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Jennifer Massey. I've lived in Southwest San Clemente for 35 years, and I'm very grateful to your taking this time to really consider the future of our city that we all love so much. In my opinion, the plan is too large and needs to be more in keeping with the volume of buildings on Avenida Del Mar and the Ralphs on South El Camino Real. This project would set a new standard, which if continued, you'd create a canyon effect and not the village feel that San Clemente citizens have repeatedly told everybody that they value. Please keep in mind the number of people who would benefit from this project versus the much greater number who will be negatively affected by this and subsequent developments of a similar size. I think what you have to acknowledge that it's a very pretty building, but if you allow all the rest of the gas stations that are now empty and all the rest of the lots on El Camino Real to be of that same size, in which a subsequent developer would, I think, appreciate or expect that you would allow him the same volume, I think then we would create what we wanted to avoid earlier on, is this sort of canyon effect like you get in New York and bigger cities. And we want to keep our Spanish village by the sea. I think the citizens have made that pretty loud and clear in the past. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Pete, and then up next is going to be Pete, Bob Conrad, then Zachary Gilmer.
Good evening, Commissioners. As a 4.5-year participant in the General Plan Advisory process, I'm disturbed to find that this is the first manifestation of MU 3.2. This project is too huge. Let me say, however, that I respect that multi-use is good. Development is good. I thank the applicant for making this commitment to the city, and I admire Architect Luna's beautiful designs. But upgrading zoning during the GPAC process from 3 to 3.2 was not without controversy. This is a 4-story structure. I remember discussing 3-story structures on this corridor. Concerns of floor area ratio, total height, and canyonization were minimized in the minutes or ignored completely in order to incentivize development. I heard Mr. Luna say that the current general plan is a product of the community. It's not. The current general plan is a product of the Community Development Department. How much incentive is really necessary? How much loss of sunlight? I haven't heard anyone discuss shadow modeling. How long will this shadow be across that section of El Camino Real during late afternoon? I've seen projects which, in principle, the city support turn into train wrecks in this town because early on, there's too much incentive. There's too much of an implied promise that we're going to grease the skids and help everybody out, and then the community rises up. And millions of dollars are wasted and bad feelings abound. I wish that we would back up a little bit and give some consideration to the concerns, the very valid concerns of, for instance, canyonization. If you don't believe in the negative effects of canyonization, go down to Oceanside. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So up now is Bob Conrad, and Zachary, and Kevin Colson, you're on deck.
Yeah, Bob Conrad, Conrad Realtors. I own the commercial building 1004 South El Camino Real, about 50 feet from this project. We've looked at a dilapidated gas station to vacant lot for 45 years. And through that 45 years, we've also had several developers try to do something on this lot, and nothing's happened. When I spoke to Nick, and we spent a lot of time going over his project, I became really sold on it. I think it's a great project. I heard comments on the freeway. I mean, it's hard to see that because that right as you get off the freeway there, the off-ramp is kind of almost blocking this project to some degree from the freeway. And also, if you blink and you're going 65 miles an hour, you will miss it totally. So I can't even understand how that is even an issue. But as far as just getting a viable project, I believe this is one. And quite frankly, you can keep making things smaller and smaller, and that'll be sitting there vacant for another 30 years because nobody can do anything on it. You've got to make a project work financially so you can actually build something that makes sense. So I'm a full proponent of it, and hopefully being 50 feet from it with my business and building has some clout to it. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sean Prestridge is on deck.
I live.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. You're on deck right now, Zachary Gilmer. That's all right. Come on up. So just as a reminder to people, when I call your name, you're on deck. You'll be third in line so that we've got everybody lined up and there's no wait as we go back and forth here. So it's Zachary, then Kevin Colson, and then Sean.
Hi, my name is Zachary Gilmer. I'm a resident of Santiago, and I am relatively new to the street. I lived there for about 5 years now, and I am excited to see something going in there. But what a lot of people have been saying is that it just seems to be too massive, and it certainly doesn't seem to have that San Clemente charm, even though it is a Spanish style architecture, and it is beautiful. And a couple of items I would like to point out is that it does actually block my view. I have a lovely view of that beautiful rolling hillside of San Clemente that's completely wiped out for this building. I also could look out of my shower window and wave to those yellow signs, so I would imagine that people that are looking out their windows could also wave to me in my shower, which is pretty exciting. I mapped out, I was curious about the walkability because there is some walkability that's there. You could walk to the Ralphs. If you only shop at Ralph's, that's great. You can walk to T Street, you know, a lot of times the downhill is pretty easy, but coming back up is tough. The walk to downtown on Del Mar is 3/4 of a mile, which is fine if you're wearing flats, but if you're doing that in heels, good luck. You may want to call Uber. It is too large, in my opinion, and right down the street there's a few residential houses that have been built. One in particular, I don't know the exact address, but it's what street is that on? On Cristobal. Before it was an empty lot, and I watched one of the houses doing a remodel, and the house started the remodel, and in the process, the new owner came in and started excavating and built this giant house that basically maxed out everything, and it is mind-boggling. And it kind of reminds me of Hermosa Beach. I used to live there, and it's, you know, everyone's 5 feet from each other and 35 feet tall. And it does have its own unique architecture, but, you know, it's certainly not Spanish style or a Spanish village by any means. And that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, Aaron, I can't read the last name. Is there an Aaron here on deck? No? Okay. You stepped out. Then Kevin Nelson, you're on deck. Please.
Hello. My name is Kevin Colson. I live in town and work in town, and I've been here since 2001 working, 2002 living. And when I was sitting there writing down my bullet items of what I wanted to say, first of all, I do support the project. I think it looks great. Everybody keeps saying that. It reminded me that my wife is always complaining. Don't want to say it looks bad, but the aesthetics in this part of El Camino aren't the best. It doesn't match up with Del Mar and what you find in the vicinity of Del Mar. We have more gas stations or vacant lots. We have auto repair, and it looks a little bit more industrial. She's always complaining about that, and this is actually an opportunity for us to get something better, something that actually fits more San Clemente. It's a mixed-use building. I like the mixed use. That you're getting everything in there. You're getting office, retail, and residential. People talk about transition. I don't know the building codes and all that, but this is the transition zone all in one. You're getting a little bit of everything all in one. But I think it's a good use for the site. I think this has also been mentioned. If you try and limit everything to you know, 1 story or minimum 1 story stepped back, and try and keep everybody happy with the view corridors, you're never going to develop the site. Or you might end up with another fast food place, which is the last thing I think San Clemente needs. I think we've got plenty. Just looking from the freeway, looking from El Camino, the story poles, yes, anything you put there is going to block a view from El Camino. The freeway blockage I think is minimal. You do block a little bit of the ocean, but I think you still have ocean above and to the sides and plenty of skyline. I think it's a good use for the area. Again, minimal impact on the views. I'm just going to hit a couple of my bullet items, make sure I didn't miss anything. I just think overall it's impressive. I'm impressed that you can get this much done in one space and not look overbearing, and also meet all the requirements of the city as far as parking and aesthetics. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And
Sure.
Bill.
Hi. So I grew up living right across the street on Santiago from this project. I studied urban design, city planning at Cal Poly. And I mean, I think this is an impressive project. I think if we're going to look at what are the future issues we have to deal with, I think that we're kind of sometimes maybe asking the wrong questions as far as parking and stuff versus the fact that this house provides a lot of housing that is a desperately needed commodity here. So I think that's kind of, we need to look at the top issues that are going on. And I think, you know, one thing that worries me is if you're really concerned about parking is that this site kind of offers a lot of advantages to provide that level parking that works. And so if we're applying these strict parking structures, you know, how are we going to be able to do this mixed-use development in sites that aren't as advantageous as this? So this is kind of an ideal solution with a really well-thought-out plan. But in other kind of flatter areas, I think it's going to be harder. So I think we want to look at how we promote this development more than how we kind of subtract from it, because I think it's going to be great. I think it will add. There's already a lot of people walking and biking with the El Camino Rail and with the routes there. So I think when you look at how we can change like the streetscaping to add to this, and rather than modify this development to make it less attractive. makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And on deck is Bill, Prestridge, excuse me, and also Brian Jalloway.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Kevin Nelson. Real quick, the project is much too large, adds much density to the area. It is too much of a change for the area, you know, compared to the other one-story buildings in the vicinity. It's too much of a view impact from the freeway. There are too many units packed into a small space there. We know that because of the contortions that Adam and the proponents had just talking about parking. There's too much there by a large factor. When I think about I think about this, just the impact that from the freeway that this is, and let alone from Coast Highway, I think about the large debate that happened over the sign on the Estrella development, the shopping center, the new shopping center. I mean, the impact of that sign is much, much less in its area than this is in its area. And this will only be the first of others. As soon as these gentlemen, as great as they are, if they get this project through, which I doubt that they will, but let's hopefully not, as well as the zoning. I hope the zoning fails. But if this goes through, then we have more of the same. Mixed use is just another word, really, for, in this case, for subterranean parking, Santa Monica style, high density, people packed too close. It's out of character to the people, all the other residents around in the area. We shouldn't make this kind of a change here. We've got a huge, enormous change coming in with this outlet mall. And we should digest that before we go turning the rest of PCH into as dense as it can possibly be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bill Prestridge. I live at 101 Santiago, right across from the project. I take the opposite view of the previous speaker. I think we need this change in San Clemente. Our end of town is horrible looking. If you drive down our end of town, old buildings, they've been there for 30, 40, 50 years. There's garbage there. There's old buildings. We need a rejuvenation. And this project is going to be a catalyst for rejuvenating our end of town. I've lived there for 35 years, and I look at this vacant lot, and I wonder when the heck are they ever going to do something with it? And it's not hard to walk around San Clemente. I walk all over San Clemente. My wife and I, we walk 3, 4, 5 miles a day. We walk to Del Mar. We walk the beach. We do the beach trail. We walk everywhere. And so making this multiple use just makes sense to me, to have residential units in this area where people can walk to places, not drive their cars, and enjoy our beach. I think it's a fabulous project, and I would like to see more projects like this in our town. Thank you.
Thank you. And Adam Rafter is on deck, and after Adam is Richard Boyer. Please.
Good evening. My name is Brian Jalowick. I live here in San Clemente. Been a resident for about 7 years. Quickly, I'm here in support of the project. The area needs change. The area needs revitalization. I think we as a community need to take every opportunity we can to work with citizens, to work with developers, work with those who want to make a difference, in particular those who are willing to listen and to take as much of everybody else's perspectives as possible. And I think you have an individual here that's willing to do that by design, by personality. So in a nutshell, I'd like to see change. I'd like to see San Clemente be better. I'd like to see us welcome those who are willing to who put their money where their mouth is and to put their passions where it may help us. And I think this is an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam?
Good evening. I'm Adam Raftery. I've been a resident of San Clemente for about 5 years. I'm up here speaking. I definitely support the project. My daughter is in swimming lessons with Nick's daughter, so I've heard about this project as well as many other projects that he's working on. And I know he's very passionate about, investing his own personal money in this city of San Clemente, which is where he resides, to make sure that we do improve, the community and especially that part of town. So I support the project. I think as a transplant, as a renter in San Clemente, I support, adding more residential opportunities for us to become homeowners as a family. It's been tough. We've been here for 5 years, relocated from Ventura looking for this type of opportunity. So I think personally it's a good opportunity as well as great for the community.
Thank you. And let me ask, Richard Boyer is the last card I have. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to this? Please hand in your card if you do. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name's Richard Boyer. I'm a member, like Pete Van Nuys was, of the General Plan Advisory Committee for the entire period that it met. What we should be referring back to here, if we want to know what the community wants, is the 2009 Vision and Strategic Plan that incorporated the results of the community questionnaire and a consultant phone survey that was statistically corrected for age and gender and so forth. What we encountered during the General Plan Advisory Commission meeting process was that when there was a discussion of focus areas, we were asked about, well, where should we intensify development? What about here? Well, what about there? And the GPAC aligned with the public input as documented in the 2009 vision and throughout the public meeting process. And the emphasis from the public was we have unique small town charm, a human scale. There's a sense of history here. Keep it looking the way it is. Don't change the appearance. Don't allow canyonization, monoliths, excessive height buildings. GPAC response to the push for intensification from the consultant or the invitation to intensify and public input was for the specific focus area, south El Camino Real west of the 5, was 3 stories on the east side, 2 stories on the west side, plus 1 story on the alley for parking, as with some existing buildings. The overriding concern was that there was no view impact from the freeway. Early in the process, all of the GPAC members, as well as council members and city staff members, attended a UCLA seminar. It was made clear that a general plan must use shall statements or it's not a plan. Despite GPAC's effort throughout the process, shall statements were systematically stripped out of the general plan and an emphasis was put on flexibility. So what we've got now is a collection of suggestions, and now we're beginning to see the effects of not following the experts' direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more cards? Anyone else who'd like to speak to this issue? Then I will close the public hearing, and yeah, let me just answer a couple questions I thought I heard, and then we'll take a quick break. One is that there was a comment and that this is a 4-story structure, and staff has introduced this as a 3-story structure. So maybe staff can describe a little bit how the calculation was done to define this as a 3-story structure.
So the way the code's written, the number of stories is dependent on the amount of a level that's above the ground. At no point in time, there are 4 levels of this building. The first level on the very bottom is the subterranean garage. Second level is would be the commercial parking area and part of a residential area. And then you've got on the top 2 levels a kind of a combination of the commercial in the front and the residential towards the rear. And at no point in time are there ever more than 3 stories stacked on top of each other. The subterranean garage. I believe that where the entrance to that garage is located is a story that's slightly tilted. It's kind of like an old tri-level house where you've got, you know, 2 levels and then another level between the two to allow for an entrance to a lower level. So it's really a, you know, multi-level building, but it doesn't ever meet the code of a 4-story structure as the way the code talks about stacking levels on top of each other.
Okay. Then if there are no other questions, I think we should take a short break till a 7-minute break until 8 o'clock. Okay, thank you. And open this up for Planning Commission discussion. Does anyone want to start us off?
I'd just like to start first, and I'll have comments beyond this after I hear from the rest of you folks. But when I first saw this, I wanted to go back to the beginning of GPAC, because that's really where this whole issue started back then. And I wanted to read just a couple of things that GPAC said about this particular corridor and ocean views. And I just a few things here. It says, Bill Hart said that since the potential to block views is situational and based on the specifics of each lot, the GPAC should recommend policy language that views of the ocean from the freeway should be taken into consideration as part of a discretionary review process. Marvin Dennis agreed that such a policy is needed, especially given that lot consolidation could result in larger projects. Pete Van Nuys explained that if you look at the view from I-5 as a period of time, each building that blocks the view removes a few seconds of a unique experience. Nancy Hunt and Karen Aloa agreed that this sentiment. Karen added that views of the ocean are an important marketing opportunity for the city and that thoughtful wording is necessary to ensure that the zoning code height limits are not abused in the future. Brian Judd said that the Planning Center will come back to the GPAC with policy direction to preserve views, but specific changes to the code, such as height limits, are not included in the general plan. That level of detail is provided during a zoning code update. And one other short one here, just to give us some perspective of what the GPAC went through. The city should capitalize on ocean views and create an identity. Several GPAC members agreed that preserving the ocean views is a priority in this area and should influence development standards. Brian offered to present a graphic view about views at the next meeting. So I just wanted to read that because I thought it's important to get a perspective of a GPAC, because that's where this whole nemesis started. But I did want to answer one thing that one of the folks that came up to speak was, we do not protect private views here in San Clemente. And the Planning Commission's purview is not to consider economic viability of a project at all. So I just wanted to say those things. And I have some other comments later on.
Okay. Anyone else?
Nobody wants to jump in. I also want to kind of build on what other commissioners say. I understand the passion and emotion of a lot of people who are adjacent to this property. Nobody's actually mentioned the medical building, just, I think it's what, 4 doors down or whatever, that's not too much of a different scale than this one. It's not quite the same bulk as far as being full, because it's got a facade on it, but height and exposure to El Camino's in the ballpark. We're kind of in a unique position here. Usually we've got rules to evaluate projects by. This is one where we're kind of creating the rules as we go, and it's a little bit tougher for us to evaluate the process. The general plan guidance has been through 4 years of review. It's been approved by City Council, adopted, so I think that is where we start and get our guidance from as far as making this decision. I thought a couple of comments on the parking issue. I got, I think, 2 different answers, and correct me if I'm wrong. Jim had one reason for giving the exceptions, and Michael kind of gave another one. But if, in fact, the residents stay there and aren't taking trips, that means guests are going to be visiting and those spaces are going to be used, which doesn't really mean that they're going to free up the spaces for the commercial parking. So I'm not comfortable in making a decision just yet. I got to think about that a little more and hear the discussion on the parking. The other thing is we don't typically take into consideration economics, and I don't think we do here, but we do have to consider the property owner's rights, the local neighborhood, and also future purchaser rights. And something we've got to do is when we craft any kind of ordinance, it's got to be repeatable. There's got to be good rules for the architect to be able to follow. He shouldn't have to guess at what we're looking for. And I think if we're requesting a view study, I think we should create some kind of guidance to the applicant of what are we looking for? I mean, are we looking for a 10% blockage along their property length, or some quantifiable number that can be repeated? Because we aren't always going to be on the Planning Commission. The next people sitting here will have to make the same decision, and it should be predictable and give property owners who buy their property expecting to do something guidance on what their property's worth, because they got to do an economic study on it. So I'm considering all those issues right at the moment, and want to hear from everybody else to see what our next step is.
Michael?
I guess I want to start by asking Jim a question. If we weren't looking at this specific project because of its unique new zoning, mixed use 3.2, what would be the normal process that we would have to bring MU 3.2 to the zoning ordinance? How would that happen? If it wasn't for this project, tell me what the normal process would be.
Well, it's actually in process. We are processing a general plan amendment to reflect some recommendations that the city council made in regard to the height in this area, in addition to what was already passed in the general plan. And we're doing more specific zoning standards for this area and several other areas in town that were the land use areas that actually changed use. And we have a consultant working on that. So that is tracking actually very close to this. And that would go, as you know, to the Planning Commission for recommendation to City Council, and then City Council would ultimately make the decision on the amendments, and assuming they would be approved, that would be then implemented into the zoning and general plan.
So that sounds a little bit like the chicken and the egg thing. In this particular case, we may be ahead of the process where the process should have been ahead of this. So we're actually leapfrogging this, and I guess I'm uncomfortable about that we're breaking new ground before we really establish what that ground is.
Yeah, my only comment, and we'll just make this a discussion, is we can't stop development in the city because we haven't processed every single zone. If a developer's ready to go, we need to give them priority over zones and sites that don't look like they're going to be moving ahead in the near future. So we can't stop the process. And I think this is the only way to, at least this is the way that it's been determined to proceed. Because like I think Jim said, it could be a year or so till all the zones get established and the ordinances are updated.
Well, just to clarify, the City Council gave us specific direction to fast track the areas that are like this to prevent this from happening any more than it is now. But, but you're right, the applicant has, the ability to process an amendment if they so wish to, and they're exercising that ability, and it's our obligation to move forward with that. I don't know if Mel has anything to add on that. I mean, you as a planning commission are are in a unique situation because you're kind of considering both sides of the coin at the same time, which is rarely, rather rare. So.
Bonnie?
Again, this is the first one going in of this type, and I think we have to be very cautious in what we decide. I do believe it will set a precedent. If you allow nicely designed features like this, although too large because it cannot accommodate enough parking, then the next time something comes before the Planning Commission for the lot next door, it's a tattoo parlor right now, but if they want to enlarge their area, then the zoning code, as I've been finding, says that you can't deprive someone else if it's gone before that has it done. So if they want to have parking exemptions as well, then the precedent has been set. The fact that the MU3 and some of this commercial development allows no setbacks is quite disturbing. I do like it that this plan did offer some minimal landscaping on the side, but I do think I would certainly appreciate more landscaping. I see that if we have these large buildings and with no setbacks next to each other again and again and again, then on both sides of the street, eventually you will see the sky if you have a sunroof or if you can look out your car. But if you look towards the ocean, you'll see a building after building and nothing in between. And I had noticed when I was studying the general plan where they included Ole Hansen's vision. I forget the exact number and recitation, but they took out a key part of his vision. And he says, I envision a town where everyone will have, where nearly everyone will have his view preserved forever. And that was missing in the general plan that was approved. I was disappointed in finding that when I studied the new Centennial Plan. But that doesn't take away what the GPAC put forth before this Centennial Plan was approved. And I think we have to think of the needs as a future, look ahead, because whatever we decide for this one project isn't just about this one project. It's about the next project and the next project. And there's always a variance, there's always a condition once something, and this is even the first one, and it's already started. So I'd like to, your thoughts on that, commissioners.
Yeah, I'll jump in. The easiest thing when evaluating a project is to say it's too big. And our existing MU zones allow densities that are big. And it almost, we're not here to rethink the general plan or the process. We're here to apply it. And from what I understand with the City Council's direction, and we've heard both sides today, people for and against the project. It seems that judged just on facts, this is very close to complying. Very close. We've got the question of parking. It seems to meet the height limitations, and if the formula works, it meets that. We are asking them to go through additional steps if we follow the recommendation in our packet to do a view study, which wouldn't normally be required of a project, except for, so we don't really have any rules of how to evaluate that view study, and repeat it down the road for additional projects. they've done a heck of a job. I mean, Michael must be very good at Jenga. He stacked the blocks in there the way that complied, and the only thing is I would need the parking resolved for me to support it. But I think it is extremely close to meeting the criteria that's been given to us and what we can anticipate the zone to have in it. So I'm leaning towards support of it.
Jim?
Wayne?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the applicant. I'm sure it's been an arduous process to go through, to say the least. On the good side of it, certainly it's the Spanish colonial revival. The landscaping is there. I like the setback and on the side and on the front. I am concerned, though, about several things. Number one, about the MU3 and the elimination of the FAR for the commercial. I really have a problem with that because all of a sudden that just disappeared from our view. And that needs to be thought out now, and that needs to be put back in. Because I think that the intent of this area in South El Camino was to really have more commercial than really residential. That's what I heard from the city council when they went through this. And so I'm you know, and he's done a mixed use here, but I think more heavily on residential than on commercial. I am concerned about the wires in back because I think people are going to be looking at the wires. I think we should consider that. And I am concerned about the parking. I am concerned about the parking there. But I did want to mention one thing here. Bart, you brought up about the medical building. It's 30 feet 10 inches from the top of the arch. You know, there's an arch there. But the top of the parapet is only 25 feet. And the Bartlett building is 22 feet. I got these figures from staff this last few days. And so I did want to mention that. I'm leaning very strongly toward the visual simulation, and I want to be sure that it's done from the top of the roof line, not from the top of the parapet itself, but from the top of the roof line itself. We already have one of these obstructions, which is the Ralph's Tower, and now we have another one which has the potential for somewhat of a limited view of the ocean there. And this becomes cumulative. First we have the Ralph's, then we have this, and then we have another building that has some obstruction of view. And all of a sudden we have more than what we had probably bargained for down the road. I don't know, though, Bart, how I can get specific on what we're looking for on that, because it's real hard. Is it going to be 10%, 5%, 30%, 50%? I don't know. You know, that's a judgment call I think each of us has to make. And I know they probably want some guidelines there, but I think just the visual simulation that they hopefully will provide to us, I think would really do it. So and also, I do want to have the amendment separate from,
Right, that's what I was gonna say.
I don't want it embedded in the project itself. I think that for purity's sake, we need to look at the amendment and then we need to look at the project. I think that is so important. And when I saw that embedded in there, I thought, why are we doing that? You know, so those are my thoughts right now. I'm really would be very favorable toward for the visual simulation and having it come back to us with some of the thoughts that I have here.
Michael, I think you were next.
Jim, can you can you put Exhibit 3 up on the screen? It's the zoning plan with the.
Was it in the PowerPoint or on the staff report?
Well, it was this exhibit with the red in it where it shows where the new
It may have been
zoning map
it may be
is.
at the end of the slide presentation.
It's in the handout.
Thought it was.
All right. And if I could just get a clarification, Commissioner Eggleston, when you said you want to separate the amendment from the project, were you talking about the rezoning?
No,
Yeah, the amendment that is at the very beginning of our packet, which is zoning amendment 14-364.
To separate the rezoning from the project specific?
He's talking about,
actions.
they're all grouped into one resolution.
Yeah.
So he wants a separate resolution pulled out from that and then voted on as a separate issue.
There's a lot to digest when it's embedded.
Well, you know, given what I've been given to look at, which is the interpretation of the mixed-use 3.2, I think the project does a pretty good job of it. And I think the architecture is really quite nice. And there's two-car garages for all the residents. And there's a lot of nice stuff about it, and it'd probably be a heck of a nice place to live because there's stunning views once the telephone poles go. You know, it reminds me of Laguna Beach. All the views are great, but they have telephone lines in them. The thing that hits me, though, and it's my architectural feeling that when you look at that, you look at that zoning plan and you see those two long swaths of red zoning, and you see that each one of those sites along the end is going to be, could be like this, could be of this size and magnitude. That feels wrong to me. It does feel wrong, and I don't feel good about that. And so I guess, in the sense, I admire what the applicant's done, but I think that the MU 3.2 interpretation has got to be wrong. It's not Spanish Village by the Sea. It's Huntington Beach. It's so many places that we've seen where we see that kind of development all along the main drag. And I'm just thinking recently that I saw something very much like that in Oceanside, where it was a senior housing project. And one or two of these, in fact, on the other side wouldn't be so bad. Wouldn't be so bad on the other side. But on this side, I don't buy it. And I can't support this because I can't support the interpretation of the MU 3.2.
Well,
Yeah, let me, Vonnie, you go ahead, and then I'm going to chime in.
Okay. Direction for the visuals, simulations. Then how about we have simulations showing the effect at a 10% reduction of ocean view, 20% and 30. So maybe we could get 3 views for comparison, something of that nature. And that could give us a good guideline to go from and give us an idea of what precedent we might want to set. How about that, if they're asking for guidance? And then also this idea of embedding 2 actions in one resolution has come up before. There's been confusion. We've had straw votes, and then at City Council there's been confusion and straw votes. And once again, please just request for my way of thinking, to keep things as simple as possible, separate the actions out, separate resolutions, please.
I'm going to chime in for a minute. I'll jump back to the GPAC. I was a member of GPAC as well. I think I ended up between GPAC and Planning Commission something like 80 public meetings I was involved in for the general plan. But when we were talking about this as a focus area, and something that really hasn't been mentioned yet, I don't think, there's a lot of discussion about 3 stories, 2 stories, 3 stories across the streets, 2 stories here, and there's kind of a lot of negotiation and over many months of, deciding, what was the best thing, and then Planning Commission discussion and City Council discussion. I hesitate to second guess all that, and I think that's not really our job here tonight. One of our jobs is to say, does it fit with the general plan, whether we think that it's the right thing to do or not. Whether the general plan is correct or not. If we think the general plan is incorrect, then that's a whole nother discussion and a whole nother approach that we have to start looking at. But one of the big reasons this was added to the general plan, as I go back in my memory, 5 or 6 years now, is because there was a very strong sense that this area needed revitalization. There had been, empty lots for decades, 50-year-old buildings that weren't really being maintained to the standard that we would want them maintained in town. Not a lot of things going on economically, not a lot of places for people to walk to grab their coffee or, have some lunch, that sort of thing. A couple little spots, but nothing as robust as we have in some other parts of town. And as we had some subject matter experts and, come in economists and, start to discuss with the GPAC at that time, how to revitalize it, what ended up coming up, not as a, let's do this stamp on it, but as a negotiation, as a collaboration, was we'll probably need something more or less of the size that we're talking about here, this MU 3.2 type of development. We need that in order to start to kickstart something here, get that area revitalized, and start offering some services to the residents that the residents, said they wanted. And according to the people we talked to, the subject matter experts, we needed a certain level of density, a certain floor area ratio, for instance, that we needed to address. So that's this is obviously the first applicant. We're kind of getting into it as to the whys and wherefores. A lot of the reason for that is because it's the first person who's coming in here. But I think it's important to remember that this wasn't capricious. It was there's an intent to it. There's a long-term strategy in terms of what the people in that area and the people in the city want to do for that area, and this was the solution to what we could do. And the applicant is trying to conform to that solution. So, given that, I look at, when I first spoke in design review and to the applicant, my first comment was, it feels a little big for San Clemente. I think it's a little bigger than what we're used to. But they've scaled it down from that, and they have a lot of landscaping that I think is, their approach to is a little unique. And when you look at that site, I've lived in Southern California all my life, and mostly in beach cities, and I've seen a lot of development done for the sake of, getting some good business going in there, and, that can end up in being bad development. And I think we need to always be on guard and cautious about that. But this is attractive architecture, and it's within the scale and scope, except for, I think, the 1 4-foot addition on the tower. It's within the envelope that the general plan has declared for that. So, I think, that has me lean in favor of the project. The first of its kind in this area, we're going to see how well it works out, and we can amend the general plan. It's a precedent in that we're doing it for the first time, but we can amend the general plan 4 times a year. So, if we approve it, it would probably be because we thought it was a good route to go. We thought it'd be successful. If it's not, well, that's why we can amend the general plan, so that we can change it and change the precedent, if you will. So those are all, I think, things to consider, and also what happens if we don't make this kind of approval. What happens to the neighborhood? It stays the same as it's been for the last 30 years, unless we do something different. If we don't do this strategy, then what strategy are we going to do to serve the residents in that part of town? And that's another thing that I haven't heard yet is, what are the alternatives? If a building like this that falls within the envelope, and I think everybody, even people who are opposed to this project, do admire the architecture of it and the approach in that respect. If we don't do that, if this doesn't fit into what the general plan is calling for, then what will? And I think that's a side of it that we have to look at as well, if we don't want this, and how are we going to solve the problems that this kind of zoning was designed to solve. Regarding the views, I was actually surprised that we didn't. I seem to recall that we had something specific in the general plan about views from the freeway. I thought we had some policies there, but I don't think we do. I think we have some general statements, but not specific policies. And I was one of the ones who spoke up there that, we tend to nickel and dime our views. We put something up in front of the ocean, and, just a little thing, but then we have another little thing and another little thing, and after a while, there's a lot blocked out. When I look at this project, I don't feel so much that way. It doesn't block the entire ocean. It actually can, when you look at it, it can have a nice contrast with the red tile roofs. So I think that that's certainly something to consider. When we, I'm not, in my mind, I'm not so sure that we need a visual, another visual study, but I'm not opposed to it either. It's certainly not a bad idea to do. If we do it, though, I do think we need to be specific. There will undoubtedly be some subjective aspects to it, but I think for the applicant's part and for future applicants, we need to make it clear what it is that we're looking for, the information we need to see, and more or less how we might be judging it. And I think that that's something that we need, if we're going to do that, if we're going to request that, I think we need to come up with, 3 or 4 criteria that we can give to the applicant so they kind of understand what we're looking for and give them some guidance. So that's what I have to say so far. Bart, I think you had something you wanted to say.
Very well spoken. You made some very good points. I did want to just make a comment to Michael. It's my understanding, it's already MU 3.2 zone in the general plan. So we're not making it MU 3.2. It's a done deal. We're just amending the zoning map and creating the ordinance to support it. So whether we're pro or con the MU 3.2, that's pretty much what we're given right at the moment, and that's what we're dealing with. And I did want to make one statement that if you look at the map that we brought up, driving along El Camino, the entire reason the city was planned this way was to have streets going west. So every block you're looking between buildings and should be able to pick up at least horizon of the ocean. And I'm going to say 3 lots, so we're probably between blocks 250 feet between streets, I'm guessing. Michael, can you? Between streets, probably 250? Something like that. So there's never going to be a block of buildings that can ever exceed 250 feet before you have a break of a road. And we'll have increased setbacks on corner lots, unlike the interior lots which have 0 setback on sides. So I think the planning-wise and all, if we can justify the parking, I'm with Jim on this one as far as I can see with the story poles, and you've already got a 3D model of the building. So it'd just be a matter of superimposing it over into a map, I assume. So I'm hoping, rather than having to start from scratch to do a 3D visualization. If the group wants the 3D visualization, great. The presentations on the wall tell me what I need to know, but I will certainly support them to help everybody else make their decision.
There's a 3D model?
His rendering there on the left is off of
but not a model itself.
No.
I thought you were talking about a built model.
A block.
Yeah.
I
appreciate Jim's comments. And if, in fact, the general plan is in error, then it should be amended. Because I don't know if this is what we all bargained for, quite frankly. And once we see the first project, we go, wow, and so I think it's going to be up to the city council to give that type of direction if they want to have the general plan amended for this stretch of road. So I do appreciate your comments on that, Jim. But I am really for a visualization. And I really think that that's very important. Again, I don't know how you can define that. I really don't know. But I'm that's my thoughts, is that we need some of the things that I've said before about the utility lines, the visualization, that type of thing. And I think that's the direction that we should be going in.
Before we continue our discussion, I just wanted to kind of lay out, I think, sort of 4 areas to sort of come to a conclusion to. so that we've got some direction for the rest of our discussion. One thing is the cultural heritage permit, because we haven't spoken about that at all, so we should probably identify that. Another is separating out the zoning amendment, whether we want to do that or not. What we want to do about the view study, yes, no, and what that might look like, and resolving how we feel about the parking. So does anyone see anything besides those 4 items that we want to make sure we hit during our discussions?
I think that's good.
I think that's probably the major ones.
I'll jump to cultural heritage permit I'm comfortable with. What are our other ones? I think I want everybody to have all the tools they can to make the decision, so I can support the visualization study. Parking, I just want to get staff to give us a little more justification and a clearer evaluation of the parking situation. I think trying to correlate this to downtown probably isn't the way to do it. We need to justify it for this site, so address it that way. It may come out to be the same requirement. And then view study, cultural heritage, parking, and what's the last one?
Zoning amendment?
Oh,
Separating-
I'm fine separating it out and making the resolutions separate items.
Okay. And Michael, I think you have had your...
Well, first off, I think breaking the 4 of them up like that makes sense. We could straw vote them or whatever, but I feel like we could make decisions on all 4 of those. And I must say to Commissioner Crandall that you've changed my mind in the fact that we're not really contemplating the particular of the MU 3.2 zone because it's already been rezoned. And in that sense, I feel like my obligation as a commissioner is that I have to live within the rules, and the rules are that this is how it's zoned, and I think the applicant's done a really good job of it, quite honestly. I think the architecture is nice. I think it's an interesting mix. I think the interpretation of MU 3.2 is probably pretty close to what everybody had in mind, if that's what they had in mind. I had nothing to do with really coming up with that. And in that sense, I feel like I have to support the project. And maybe it's up to the city council or some other higher powers to think about whether or not that interpretation is really appropriate for the city of San Clemente, because that's going to be a judgment of the heart and probably not of the mind for Michael Smith.
Just wanted, when Wayne talks, mention we do want to consider the FAR for commercial to be in the...
Yes, absolutely.
FAR for commercial to be where? As part of the...
Not deleted out of the...
It's deleted. Thank you.
I'd like to get some clarification, because Wayne mentioned that we had the .35 in the standard. Is that the consensus of the commission of what we should be shooting for? I know the project's real close to that. Just in direction of what or is there some wiggle room in that number at all?
Project was 3.4.
What was the direction from city council for that?
Well, I'm not going to claim that I remember everything, but what I do remember is that there was direction regarding specifically right now the FAR percentage for .35 for commercial doesn't get any break when they provide an outdoor, say, an outdoor courtyard, which is one of our goals, right? So this came up with a project in a downtown that the Olin project, remember, that didn't get approved. But they could have expanded their courtyard if they were allowed to reduce their commercial area. But they were limited from expanding their courtyard because they had to have the .35 commercial, and there was no credit for the courtyard, even though it would be used for the restaurant space. So that was one thing we learned from that project, was that's probably a bad idea. Allow restaurants that are going to use the courtyard for a commercial space to be counted toward the commercial FAR.
Jim, could you go back and research that a bit more? you know, before we come up with a specific number on that. Because I think that's crucial, because, you know, I think that's crucial for us to understand what was the intent on that.
All right, well, this is what I have so far. Regarding the cultural heritage permit, oh, by the way, I too, we discussed it in design review some. I have no
I don't
no
have
issue with it.
objection to the cultural.
I haven't heard any objections to that. Separating the zoning amendment, our direction to staff is to research that, look into re-adding that minimum FAR and addressing how the courtyard might fit into that. Is that right? So view study and parking. What's the feeling about parking? Is there a general sense of, we basically have two options, the applicant's option and staff's option. Is there a feeling on a preference there?
I have a problem comparing this to the downtown for parking. And I have a difficulty with shared parking because I think that limits them to be able to lease to a restaurant that's open at night, for example. And so I think that's, you know, I have a problem with shared parking. So and I'm really, when it comes to parking requirements, I'm pretty much a stickler on parking, as you probably well know. So
I'm in agreement with that.
I'll just throw one thing out there. Downtown, sometimes we've talked about getting rid of curb cuts and providing an additional parallel or perpendicular parking space or angled parking. Is there any way that the applicants can get credit for creating additional parking spaces on El Camino Real by eliminating those curb cuts? Has that ever been done?
No, not officially, no.
Okay.
Because it swings both ways, because we have to allow a curb cut for access for property. We don't penalize the developer for doing that, because that's only fair. And so I know that we've sort of in a roundabout way considered it when we've done some waivers in the downtown. Not officially.
yeah.
Another note on this site, there's a bus stop in front on El Camino Real, and so engineering and planning staff were pretty confident that it's entirely red curbed now.
Okay.
So we wouldn't anticipate any additional parking on El Camino
Can we
Real.
get the bus stop moved?
I could talk with
I mean, that would be certainly
our transportation engineering division.
that would be
about
something that we could
possibility.
certainly at least consider. I mean, we've done this before, have we not? Yeah, bus stops removed to create parking in front. I mean, if there's no parking in front, I mean, this is going to be a problem.
Did you have something more you wanted to add?
More?
Okay, Fonnie?
So I would take that as direction to work with the city traffic engineer to see if there's any opportunities to maximize parking in the front through potential relocation of or moving the bus stop to another location.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, good.
Fonnie?
Well, one of my parking concerns, since we keep bringing up the Del Mar area, which is another place where it has been experimented with and allowed pedestrian-friendly type of development in which there was supposed to have been residential on top and some pedestrian-friendly business on the bottom. And the idea would be that there would be less parking needed. And so what happens, the same thing that Wayne was saying, there's no guarantee on what type of business is rented out. Larry Culbertson has brought in about 8 properties numerous times to share of specific properties that were allowed to develop in this way, and they do not have the pedestrian-oriented business on the bottom. They have residential or other types of use instead that's requiring more parking. And so the best intentions don't always work out that way, and I don't really believe we have the control over what will take place after we make a decision. And so since this has happened before, I'm very cautious about this happening again. And so I feel that we need to stick with the zoning requirement for the parking, which is 3 more spaces.
Well, I think I'm pretty much in line with everyone else. I think there's good arguments on both sides, but I think I tend to lean towards staff arguments on that. So I think with the parking, you know, we can let the applicant know at least what our feelings are, and then staff can look into how we might get some more parking in front that might help the neighborhood as well. Come back with that. So that leaves the view study. So, anyone want to chime in on that?
Yeah, if there was one commissioner that wanted the view study and needed it to make their decision, I'd support it. So if they feel they need it to make their decision, I can go along with that.
And what are the parameters of what we would want to see in a view study to help us make that decision? Because this is not the full formal view study you were talking about. It's something a little less formal and also something kind of new that we haven't done before.
Couple things. A visual simulation is pretty cut and dry. It's not, you know, the key thing is just establishing where the view is going to be from. And I think we've all agreed that the most important view that we want to understand because of the policy that's in the general plan is a view analysis from the freeway. From the slow lane, or the slow lane, I shouldn't call it the slow lane, the outer lane of the freeway. That view is, you know, what we'll have a simulation done for. And then we have a well-established process for view analysis for view corridors, and I'm sure we can adapt that to this particular case. And that was actually done several years back with our planning. Well, actually, our planning commission, there's a planning commissioner, Dennis Papillion, whose landscape architecture firm actually developed one, I think, for Caltrans. And we modified it for San Clemente. And so we can use some version of that. It just, you know, what it does is just observes, you know, the existing view and then compares it to the view with this project within it and evaluates both the good and the bad things within the view corridor. You know, sometimes there's power lines and ugly architecture, and then, you know, so there'll be some improvements with the view, and there'll also be some destruction of a portion of the ocean, and you know what that means. So there'll be, you know, that's the kind of evaluation that goes through and provided as part of the staff report.
I think in the view study, I think it would be good to see as well. This view is sort of at right angles, looking straight out at the property in the ocean. Most people on the freeway, if you're a passenger, you might look at it from that angle, but I would imagine a lot of people are looking at it as they're approaching it from the north or from the south. So they're looking at a more oblique angle. So it might be good to see that rendering done.
Several?
Yeah, you know, 2 or 3, right? You know, right on, one from the north, one from the south, sort of a thing, so we can kind of get the whole picture if we're looking at it. If we're trying to simulate basically someone in a car.
With shadows.
And what we can also do is just to show you, I believe that the northbound freeway, you can't see the story poles. But we can show some different photographic angles so that that's demonstrated. And then we can pick several ones that kind of show, you know, as you go by it, maybe from an angle and then more straight on.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, and the other planning commissioners can certainly chime in on this, I'm not sure we need to see, you know, 10 different angles or 10 different things. We just something kind of pretty basic, just the main sort of ways.
I almost think you
it's
could
gonna
really
be
cover it
viewed.
in 2. One would be kind of straight on and one kind of from an angle. Because once you get past it, you're not.
Yeah, when you pass it, you're not looking
Hopefully
back
you're
at
not
it.
going.
Yeah. All right. Bonnie, did you have something else you wanted to add? Okay.
I just had one other thing,
Yes.
and that was the utility lines, if there could be some analysis of whether or not that's feasible or not. I think that would be.
You mean having the applicant be responsible for
I don't
that?
know who would do it, but I think that it would be important to, well, I think it's important to the applicant to make that determination also, because his residents are going to be looking at those lines.
Okay. Did you want to chime in on that at all, or did you have an opinion, one way or the other?
Do we have I've got a question for the city attorney. Do we have the right to, that's Edison's, or the telephone company's property before it hits the property line, or to the connection?
Yeah, whether or not the commission can impose that requirement really depends on whether or not there's an undergrounding requirement in the code. That's where you find those requirements typically. So, and I can defer to Jim in that regard. But if there isn't a requirement to underground, then it's very difficult to require the applicant unless it's conditioned as part of the approval if it's approved.
I was under the impression, maybe I'm wrong, I was under the impression that new development, just in general in the city, new development had to underground any above-ground wires. Is that, at least in certain circumstances?
No, I don't, because I know plenty of developments that haven't been required to do that.
Okay.
But there might be certain districts where it's a goal. We'll really have to look into it and also check with our Public Works Department and see, what that would take, and what, sometimes you have to have the cooperation of the utility company as well. So I'll take a little research and we'll come back with an analysis on that.
I'm not asking that the applicant is required to, but it's just an analysis at this point, whether or not that's feasible or not.
All right, that sounds good. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You want me to answer your question?
Please.
Commissioner
I just
Rowland-
wanted you to be able to
No,
give your input
I
if you
appreciate
want.
that because Commissioner Eggleston, your point is really well taken. Those views, I think, impact everyone from El Camino Real badly, one way or another. But the power lines are not on my property. They're not on the alley. I believe they're either on an easement on the property owner on the other side of the alley or on city property. There is a requirement that I underground all power lines on my property, and so we comply with that, obviously. I've had a utility consultant look at this line. The line is a substantial server running all the way down. It feeds all of downtown. There are about 5 or 6 substantial high voltage power lines attached to that line. To do anything to that line would require a substantial length of power line to be underground, and it would cost millions and millions of dollars. And so I've had a conversation with a couple of council members specifically about this. And one of the things that I've been encouraged to do, not me specifically, but just people within that area, and I know there are a number of stakeholders in this community, I don't know how excited they are about that idea, but is to try and form an assessment district like they did up on the hill, and to all contribute to that and underground it. You can put it on a property tax bill, but that becomes a big contentious issue, and I'm not sure that that's a subject for tonight.
Okay, well, dump that idea.
Thank you. So, let's see, so in terms of the zoning amendment, the view study, the parking and the utility lines, does staff have what they need, enough direction from us to proceed? Okay. Okay.
I'd like to make a comment to thank the applicant. I mean, this has been a arduous project for you, to say the least, and thank Michael Luna, who's a terrific architect here in town. So thank you very much. And I know it's been a difficult process, but this is the first one of this, and it takes time, and unfortunately.
So, I know staff had a recommendation about continuance. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion for continuance with.
How about, we can make a motion, we can continue it to the staff want it on the 17th?
You're not going to have enough time.
Anna, did you have the date?
In order for us to have time to review any new information, the staff report, July 2nd, we'll be cutting it close.
So I think the second meeting in June is the 17th, if I have that right.
I think there's a meeting on the 2nd in June. I think that's cutting it a little close in terms of my ability
Oh, I think so
to
too.
revise prepare a staff report that analyzes these items plus any new information.
Right, so that's why I was saying June 17th. I think that's our second meeting in June.
He said June's not going to be.
He said July 2nd.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said June 2nd wasn't enough time.
June 2nd, I don't think.
June 17th, if that's right. If it's the
I
2nd, then
thought he
it's
said
working
July
meeting, that
2nd.
would be the 16th.
I think the 16th was, yeah.
Oh, I thought it was the 3rd and the 17th, but I could be wrong.
I need to look at the calendar.
Also have one on 12.
Third and
That's a special one, though. No, it's an adjourned regular.
Well, here's the calendar.
Adam, is that going to give you enough? Is that going to give you enough time? June 17th or whatever
Well,
it
if
is.
for whatever reason we couldn't get it done in time, we would just continue it for that date. But I think we can do that.
Do we need to we don't need to give a date, do we? At this
Well,
point?
if we don't, it just saves us the requirement requirement to re-advertise.
Right. Okay, very good, very good.
So Wayne, you made a motion. Do you want to do it to a date specific?
To the second meeting. To the second meeting in June, which would be?
Well, the 17th.
The 17th? The 17th of June? Speak.
Right, no, that's.
The second regular meeting in June.
Yes, it's an adjourned meeting.
It's the second regularly scheduled meeting.
Second
Regularly scheduled meeting in June.
Okay.
Second.
Bart, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimously passes. Is Don or Julia still here?
Yeah, right.
I know Julia wouldn't be, but I thought maybe Don might, yeah. All right. So let's continue. We have no new business. We have no old business, so we are up to reports of commissioners and staff. Does anyone have any reports they'd like to make?
I don't have a report, but I do have another request for Jim, and that is, we still need to have council discussion with regard to home-based businesses. And I don't think it requires a staff report. I think it just amounts to a discussion amongst us, even for a half hour, on one of our study sessions. So.
So, yeah, okay, the home occupation permit?
Yes.
So, I got a question too. If we're now gonna make these conditions on this project, looking at the view and taking another poke at the parking requirement, let's suppose that it does block the view. What are we gonna do? Are we gonna tell them we can't build it?
We're past this agenda item. I don't know if it's appropriate to continue discussion on it.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out where that's all gonna go.
We'll include an analysis.
Okay. I had an item I've been promising to talk about the Mobility Task Force. I created about maybe a 10-minute presentation here. I just thought if people were interested, I would be happy to talk about it. If people aren't, I'd be happy to move on or do it at another time. It's really up to the commission if you want to hear about it. Okay. Tom had did a presentation last night to City Council. So why don't you go ahead? This is, it turns out we were in phase 1. Where he proposed a phase 2. Our purpose in phase 1 was to identify mobility issues that require attention over the next few years and make recommendations to council on areas to address. Next one. We ended up, actually in the first meeting, identifying a focus area that included these specific areas, just because this is where a lot of the mobility issues look like they are arising over the next few years. These aren't really the only areas. In particular, there's Vista Hermosa and there's La Plata extension. But that's sort of out of this area, and we wanted to have a group that focused on one area. So the changes to Marblehead Coastal, Pico and I-5, the effects to North Beach and Shore Cliffs Middle School were sort of the areas that we felt had the biggest weight for mobility in the next few years. Next one. So this is one of the artifacts that came out of that. It's just it's a map of the focus area. You can't see it very well on this slide, but obviously the yellow area is the area we're focusing on, and there's some red clouds in there that describe the key stakeholders in that area, such as residents of North Beach, Capo Unified for the Shore Cliffs area, that sort of thing. Next one. We had at the first or second meeting identified some research assignments. So various members of the committee went off and did some research in these various areas. One thing that ended up with was a focus area map. The Project V Transit, that reminded me actually of an old science fiction show, called V. But that's the kind of the circulator, the Orange County circulator trolley in town. public safety concerns as a result of what's going on in Marblehead Commercial and other things, communications for mobility issues, particularly with the construction that's going on with the commuter lanes on I-5, issues, special issues that might arise with Marblehead Coastal and Taylor Morrison, the residential portion of Marblehead. A number of issues that could arise in North Beach. I looked into that and we discovered a number of issues. We had someone look into the Capo Unified and our relationship with them. And also I-5 signage. This is not signage on I-5, but things like construction signage or signage that says, you know, businesses open during construction, something to help support the businesses a bit. Yeah.
You know, I travel quite around the county for my appraisal business, and I see signs from time to time for construction signage, which are really incredibly effective. You know, it says business is open, and then they list the major tenants, the major businesses below that. I don't know if that's something that's being considered or not.
Yeah, that's one that the research ended up resulting in, this is something we should consider. That's kind of where we are.
And who does that signage? Is that the city, or is that?
I don't know. This was kind of the research project to see, you know, what we need to look into these a little more and see if, you know, how much meat they had to them. And now it's basically been a recommendation to City Council that now we have to look into this. So we haven't really discussed some of the specifics like that.
Yeah, San Juan had these signs also, and I should have taken pictures of them when they had for the Ortega Highway. Really effective signage, very nicely done with nice graphics. It's just not a construction sign, you know, that looks like plywood or anything like that. They're very nice construction signs with logos on them and that type of thing for the city of San Juan, the logo of city. In fact, I spoke with the Chamber of Commerce of San Juan, and they sent me some information. I should send it on to you about some of the signage that they had for the construction. Really nice signage for what businesses are open. Very effective.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that in. Yeah, if you want to send it to me, I'm happy to take that into our next meeting. So let's jump to the next one. These are the recommendations made to City Council. They were a lot of these. They really the focus is around communication. A lot of these things, sort of kind of what falls into it is effective ways to communicate and route people. We recommended that there be a phase 2 to this that identify more specifically recommendations and work plans. We kind of have what we would consider a work plan right now, these sort of bullet items, but we want to get, you know, more specific, and for each bullet item say, here's what we would recommend that the council do to approach this. There's a core group that's been identified for phase 2. It is the same as the core group for phase 1. But they also want an extended group, really subject matter experts, other people who aren't, you know, part of that core that can still make a contribution to be involved as well. The idea is that we would have monthly meetings with core groups and specific invitees who might be pertinent to the discussions in that meeting. These would be public meetings, and also have quarterly meetings of the full group. Next one. These are a list of the more specific recommendations. Those didn't get indented on your thing. That's all right. So basically, you see the little yellow bullet. That's sort of the main item, and the orange bullet underneath that was kind of one example of what might happen as a result of addressing that. So, for instance, the Avenida Pico interchange. The Avenida Pico interchange, so for instance, that might mean some mobility management to the Avenida Frontera, Avenida Presidio areas. Addressing Marblehead Coastal, there's a lot of discussion on the commercial traffic and tour bus. This is like, you know, when do the trucks come in? You know, in other areas, in other parts of town, we sometimes have rules for when trucks can come in, at night or things like that. So that's something for this group to look at. And also, the numbers we have are something like, that I've heard are in the range of once Marblehead is completely built and going at full capacity, is that we would have something in the range of 10 million visitors a year. A lot of those would be coming in on tour buses. So what does that mean, to North Beach? What does that mean for getting off the freeway? What do we need to do around town for that? Improvements north of Avenida Estacion, that is really the bike lanes and pedestrian lanes that we've talked about that are going up PCH. Really, as people come off of those, as bikes and pedestrians come off of those, what happens when they merge, and how do we get them to where they want to go in town? We don't want a bunch of people, racing their bikes down that bike path and they end up on the beach trail as opposed to the coast trail, for instance. So we want to make sure people get to where they need to go, so there's not this jamming up and people not being sure, what's what. The opening of West Avenida Vista Hermosa, which has already happened, but what are the effects of that? There's some concerns about the kids now coming home down that road and walking home, like through North Beach and even along the beach trail. So how does that going to affect the pedestrian traffic in those areas, for example? North Beach, there's a number of things that it can be affected since it's the closest community. You remember the bulb outs at Pico and Boca de la Playa that the bids weren't really right for that, but that's still something that we want to look at. What might happen once the Ole Hansen Beach Club improvements are completed, and is there going to be a mobility impact there? The new parking lot that has been under discussion and is under review by Coastal Committee. There's been talk also, there was talk brought up about a Class 1 bike path out of North Beach, possibly along where the drainage channel is right now. There's towns that have made some very nice improvements there. That's probably a very long-term project, but it is a possibility for something for us to get a little more specific or take it to the next step. Also, various transit improvements. We talked about turnouts for buses, particularly if there's tour buses coming down. How are we going to manage that sort of a thing? So those are kind of the main areas and some potential examples of things that we might be looking at. Next one. So we want to use mobility. Our objectives is to use mobility element of the general plan as a compass and look at presenting to City Council achievable, fiscally responsible work plans for these various areas. We also want to make sure that we have a sustainable plan and maintain our existing infrastructure, that we don't say, well, we're not going to fill the potholes so that we can do something else, for instance. We don't want to detract from existing engineering priorities as well. These are kind of extra things that we need to do. The idea is to give annual reports to City Council, and perhaps one of the most important things is that the task force will be sunset in 3 years or when the City Council is satisfied with the work that we've done, whichever is sooner. So there's a kind of a definite start and end date to this. I'll mention too, we pretty much time box our meetings. So we come in and it's like, okay, we've got an hour here, we've got 2 hours. And, when we come to the end of that time, we're pretty much done. Next slide. Is that the end one? Yep, that's the last one. Pardon me? Yeah. No. So that's it in a nutshell. It looks like, we're going to be moving forward with phase 2 of this task force to look at these areas in more detail and reporting to the City Council. And I'd be happy to report back periodically to the Planning Commission as well.
I just wanted to mention a topic that was brought up at last night's City Council meeting. They're going to be requesting that the in order to help in communications, that the Planning Commission Chair make at least a quarterly report on what's going on at the Planning Commission and decisions that are being made, that kind of thing, just to keep kind of the lines of communication open.
Is that like, up at the podium for 3 minutes kind of a thing? Or
Yeah, it would be under presentations to council.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. And we need a little bit more communication there, so that would be good. If there's nothing more, do we have a motion and a reminder that our next meeting is an adjourned regular meeting on May 12th? So do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion for adjourned meeting on May the 12th.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned.